One sunny day, the young man was jumping up, clapping his hands and quietly counting numbers out loud. This count had already reached 1,000 jumps. This guy was overweight. He diligently and persistently did the exercise until 5 other young men took their eyes off him. It turned out that this guy's name was Cha Mu Yul, and those young men standing around decided to take off all of the fat creation's clothes and start filming him on their phones. The young man who was videotaping the whole thing said with a smirk on his face that the outcast's legs were shaking too funny, and the guy next to him replied that the sight looked pretty funny anyway. But suddenly, the fat man abruptly fell to his knees from being very tired. He was breathing heavily and trying to bring his breathing back to normal, and sweat was slowly dripping off his body. All the guys who were standing not far from Cha Mu Yul were at a loss as to why he suddenly stopped jumping. All the guys with surprised eyes looked towards the fat freak. One of the offenders slowly walked towards the pig, saying that the guy was in very big trouble because he was quite fat. The fatty raised his frightened eyes and replied in a quiet voice that he could still keep jumping. Sweat slowly dripped off his body and face. Then the young man, with a snide smile on his face, began to refuse and said that the fat freak was having a very difficult time and had no desire at all to lose weight. After these words, the rascal brought an iron bucket, in which was a remnant of not fresh and in some places spoiled vegetables. He said that the pot-bellied creature would have to eat it all again. The offender looked at him with great disdain, and in his eyes was visible intense hatred before this chubby guy. With his gaze he could pierce absolutely any person. The fat man's pupils shrunk to half their size and his lip tips drooped downwards. It was obvious from his face that he was very scared by the whole situation. The offending man shouted loudly for the fat man not to stall and start eating everything. The piece of fat finally decided to do this hard for the psyche act. He silently pulled his trembling hands to the dirty iron bucket, where there was slop. Standing over his soul was the guy who brought that same dirty bucket. The fat man started making sounds of pleasure and that he was really enjoying this food. At this time, all the other offenders were standing behind these two. The fat freak still pretended to be satisfied with everything, and through his tears, he continued to eat the garbage and moo from the bliss of spoiled food. A young man with brown hair color, smiling economically, said that he was disgusted to look at the whole picture, and the guy standing behind him replied that this fat stooge looked like a real animal. Suddenly, the offender mercilessly kicked his foot. Cha Mu Yul's fat and disgusting body. It was so strong that the ugly man toppled backwards, and drool flew from his mouth to the sides. The fat man curled up and covered his head with his hands. The 3 young men started kicking him with their dirty feet, telling the pig not to stop and to eat all the food from the iron bucket until the end. On the body of the fat creature, red spots began to appear from the bruises the outcast had received. The guys continued to bully the guy. They called him all kinds of names, saying that he was a pig and a fat bastard. Tears appeared on Cha Mu Yul's face. While he was being beaten, he was quietly crying while covering himself from the strong blows from his abusers. That same evening, when the fat man came home, he made a noose of thick rope and holding onto it with his hands. The guy remembered all the events that had happened to him all today, and from this, he again cried very hard. The fat freak finally decided on this strong act and tried to commit suicide. He began to dangle, waving his legs in different directions. The guy gasped and grunted from lack of air. Cha Mu Yul opened his eyes as he suddenly saw a silhouette that said that in the future, he would conquer the world. These words were said by a young athlete. The noose the guy had made began to tear and eventually broke off completely, the fat bastard flying straight to the floor. The fatty was greatly frightened by what had just happened to him. He clutched his neck, and from his ugly body, sweat slowly dripped down from his excitement. Outcast looked at his hands and fearfully asked himself what had just happened to him. As it turned out, he had risen from the dead and joined the soul of the MMA athlete behind him. In Fatty's memories, there was a moment of a fight between 2 guys. The athletes were beating each other up in every way possible and each was trying to win the round. There was a huge crowd of people who wanted to see this fight. The referee commented that Mahmudov threw a very hard punch and hit Cha Mu Yul in the jaw. The fans were supporting Mu in every way possible and shouting for him to keep going. Mahmudov furrowed his eyebrows and viciously hit his opponent straight to the chest. The latter managed to close in and block his opponent's punch in time. The jury shouted that Cha Mu Yul was indeed able to improve his defense. This fight remained as intense. Mahmudov decided not to lose the opportunity and hit his opponent with an uppercut from the left side. The competitor did not have time to react, and from the strong attack, he lost his balance and tipped his head back. The referee yelled for Cha Mu Yul to get a punch straight to the jaw. The young man tried anything to protect his body from the blows, but Mahmudov kept punching him non-stop. Makhmudov made his final, decisive blow towards his opponent. It was a very strong attack, as Cha Mu Yul completely lost his coordination and fell off his feet, straight to the floor, and more blood came out of his jaw. The athlete who conceded defeat in this intense round wanted to become the strongest man in the world. He believed he could do it. This photo showed an exclusive contract with Cha Mu Yul. The fat man sat at his desk and stared at one point, and drool slowly dripped from his mouth. The guy thought about the fatal weakness finally being exposed. He couldn't understand at all what was starting to happen to him. The outcast was still sitting and staring at one point, thinking about what all this could mean. His desk mate looking at the fat man in surprise and not understanding what had happened to him. After that, the fat bastard lowered his head down and silently looked at his chubby fingers. The ugly man sat slouching at his desk, and behind him appeared the silhouette of that MMA athlete. After a short pause, the fat man finally realized that it was all true and this guy had decided to be reborn in his body. The greasy face lowered his head down. He excitedly said that two completely opposite souls had somehow managed to be reborn into one. Cha Mu Yul confidently said that he completely remembered all the moments that belonged to the other soul, namely how the athlete worked hard on his body and did different kinds of training in order to pump himself up to the best. The fat man remembered absolutely all the victories and fights of this young man who decided to settle in his body. The fat creature added that he remembered every memory of the original owner of this body. He couldn't forget even the smallest detail of the athlete's life. The fatty looked at his hands fearfully and said that in other words, from now on, he would have to share his memories with the young man. While Cha Mu Yul was in his thoughts, the offenders decided that this was the best moment to punch the fat outcast in the face. The young man on the right told his friend that if you hit a person exactly the way he hit the fat man, he could easily get a concussion. The guy with black hair added that it would be best if his comrade hit the fat pig with his fist. After the punch, one of the offenders pointed his finger in the direction of the outcast and surprisingly told his buddy that the guy was okay. Cha Mu Yul took hold of his cheek and a strong fright could be seen in his eyes. The guy in the white shirt laughed and said that the fatty could still recover even though he had been hit. He added that he thought this bastard was really tough. The fellow's words really pissed the guy off. He was unhappy with the whole situation and looked at his buddy with disdain. The offender whispered that he was really embarrassed by this shit. A guy in a blue sweatshirt approached Cha Mu Yul and aggressively asked him what he was looking at. The offender asked a question regarding whether the fat man wanted to get his ass kicked properly. The bully shouted loudly for the piece of fat to know his place. He kicked with all his might at the table where the outcast was sitting. The chairs and desks that were nearby flew apart and the fat bastard flew backwards. The guy who was standing behind, with a smile on his face, asked his companion a question as to why he had beaten the child. The latter, with clenched teeth and furrowed eyebrows, aggressively replied that the fat man's face made him mad. The offender noticed that the fat bastard was still looking at him. He squeezed his eyebrows and angrily asked the fat man if he was crazy. This whole situation was really pissing the young man off. The classmate yelled for the asshole to get what he deserved and took another swing at Cha Mu Yul. He hit him with his foot so hard that he tipped his head and fell backwards. The fat man was lying on the floor with his legs and arms spread. He was staring at one point and didn't understand why the blow seemed painless. The guy couldn't believe it at all. One of the hooligans turned towards the idiot and with a snide smile on his face said that he felt sorry for the kid and if it were him, he would start faking fainting. His comrade asked him to shut up and not to make noise for nothing. The offender added that they should not pay attention to the fat man and just go to the canteen. The guys had already started to leave the office to go eat in the dining hall. But suddenly, Cha Mu Yul calmly got up from the floor. He did so without any difficulty. Even the fact that a few minutes ago he had faced a strong addition from his classmates did not bother him at all. Suddenly, the fat bastard shouted loudly, "Hey!" He did it so that the hooligans would pay attention to him. The guys turned back in surprise to see what was going on. When the offenders turned around, what they saw was the fat man standing confidently in a fighting stance, his silhouette mirroring the actions of the past owner of this body. Cha Mu Yul had hatred and anger in his eyes, telling the guy about daring to hit him again if he had that much courage. The boys turned and looked at the fat man in surprise. They thought they had heard it all, or at least it was a dream. The guy in the blue sweatshirt questioned the fat bastard as to what he wanted from them and whether the outcast was going to fight the guys. His comrade standing behind him and smiling snidely. It was obvious from the guy's fat face that he was quite serious. Cha Mu Yul confidently questioned the offender as to why he suddenly backed up and whether he was scared or not. The school bully shouted very loudly that he wasn't scared at all and he wasn't even scared. And after that, the guy swung his fist and angrily shouted that he would destroy the fat outcast once and for all. In the same second, the offender's attack reached the fatty himself. Fist like a stone, stopped on the fatty guy's cheek, but it had no effect. Cha Mu Yul calmly stood and looked at the bully with empty and glassy eyes. The offender did not expect such a turn of events. His plan was to destroy the fat bastard in just one blow. The young man had sweat on his face, and his eyes shrank and began to display a strong fright. As suddenly, the fat man laughed. It was so loud that from the outside it would seem that Cha Mu Yul was crazy. The guy in the blue sweatshirt very loudly and excitedly asked the fat man a question as to why he was laughing. And then, the offender swung and prepared his fist to strike the outcast's face again. Cha Mu Yul realized that everything was going according to plan and he had one more chance to take revenge on all those people who had been bullying his body all this time. The fat man swung his fat fist and punched the bully right in the face. All the people who were at that moment near the guys who had a misunderstanding were in shock. Each of them, even in their thoughts, could not imagine that the outcast, who only knew how to eat candy and different kinds of fried and caloric food, is capable of such a strong act. The fat pig's punch was so strong that his opponent flew to the very back of the classroom, the young man landing at the feet of his comrade, and on his cheek, left a red mark from the attack from Cha Mu Yul. Suddenly, a spreadsheet appeared in front of the fat man's eyes. On the left side was full information about Cha Mu Yul, namely that he was 18 years old. His height was 175 centimeters. His weight was 112 kilograms. The city he lived in was called Seoul, and his fighting style was ordinary. On the right side were abilities. They included deflection, painful, knee strike and direct attack on the opponent. After that, the fat bastard flipped the page and there was an icon that characterized resilience. The fat bastard realized that in his past life he was very weak, since the level of this power was very low and indicated the smallest level of the ability. Fatty realized that from this moment, he had a chance to translate his moments from his past life into a very real reality and start fighting with every offender who bullied the guy for a long time. The school bully's comrade was shocked by everything that was happening around him. From the young man's face, slowly sweat began to flow, and his pupils shrank significantly. The guy wanted to believe that it was all a dream and he was just sleeping. Cha Mu Yul stood and looked frighteningly in the distance. He couldn't believe that the status window after waking up was all reality. The fatty began to remember the mission window he had seen at the very beginning. The offending man clenched his teeth and nervously said that the fat bastard looked very scary. It was evident the fear the young man felt as he stuttered his words. The fat man tilted his head to the side and in a low voice asked the bully if he liked to eat solid food. And then the outcast added to his words that the bully would eventually find it very difficult to chew, as he would probably lose some teeth. As suddenly, a fellow school bully sharply hit the fat pig with his fist in the face and shouted loudly that the outcast is very self-confident, thereby being a complete jerk. Cha Mu Yul had a combat mission. It was that the fat guy needed to fight the bullies and collect 30 teeth from the school bullies. There was a reward of 20 points for this task. The outcast grabbed the guy by his sweater and said about how he was not going to stop at all and hold back in his punch. Up to this point, the fat bastard had only collected 2 teeth out of 30. The fat man swung his fist and punched the school bully in the face so hard that blood started coming out of the guy's mouth and his neck turned sideways. The fat man stood and looked at his opponent with hatred. He furrowed his brows and came to the conclusion that he would become a famous champion. No matter how hard it was, he would reach his goal. In his previous life, when the guy fought Mahmudov, he was defeated. This perfect final and dangerous fight ended fatally for Cha Mu Yul. He was lying on his stomach covered in blood after an extremely strong punch from his opponent. The referee was shouting that it was just an amazing fight and all the fans were waiting for the fatal elbow strike from Mahmudov. But at that moment, the referee waved his hands excitedly, which meant that the confrontation was over. Mahmudov rejoiced and shouted loudly, as he was able to defeat his opponent. But Cha Mu Yul was well aware that from the beginning of the fight, the match was a failure, as the opponent's muscles were in shape only thanks to steroids and everything around was a deception. After this fight, the young athlete who had a future and hope lost everything he had and ended up in the hospital with an inhaler in his mouth. This blow divided Cha Mu Yul's life into before and after. He wanted other fighters to take his place because he thought he was a scapegoat. As suddenly, an unknown man put his hand on the forehead of the guy and loudly said his name. On the face of the stranger was visible a suspicious smile, and the athlete himself did not understand what was happening now. The stranger said that he hoped Cha Mu Yul would do what he wanted, but the athlete still didn't want to listen to him. After that, the man took out his phones and with a smile on his face showed the video. He thanked the guy for making the elderly stranger's image clean again like before thanks to him. As it turned out, this man was a CEO named Cha Mu Yul. He turned on the young lad with his conference call telling him that everyone's hopeful Cha Mu Yul was leaving MMA for good. In his speech, the principal spoke confidently about how he thought his choice was the right one, and afterward, he added that he promised to take care of the young lad for the rest of his life. The man with a crazy smile on his face said that most likely the people at the top decided to get rid of the athlete once and for all. As suddenly, in the room before the guy came 5 men who had an athletic build. The director turned around and with a smirk asked the guys a question regarding whether everyone had already gotten here. Jang Yong-gil pointed at the former athlete who was lying on the bunk and didn't move at all. And after that, he said that it was their senior who didn't want to obey at all, and for that reason, the guys should carefully follow the principal's rules if they didn't want to get hit from the back or head. All the guys agreed with the man's words. When the director was leaving, he lastly said for Cha Mu Yul to be a good boy, and after that, he added for the former athlete to be healthy, even if he couldn't fight on the battlefield anymore. The director disdainfully said that the guy didn't need to teach his juniors anything new anymore. All the guys left his room. Cha Mu Yul lay staring at the ceiling, because due to the severe injury that leads to paralysis, he could move and give signs of life, only with the help of his eyes that were filled with tears. The former athlete was still alive, but felt as if he was already dead. Fatty was sitting at his school desk and in front of him was an electronic icon with his abilities and skills. He was thinking about whether it was all a common illusion and whether it was true that after death there was a rebirth to a new life. The fat bastard added the fact that all these events looked very realistic. The outcast began to look at the table more carefully and noticed that before he died, he really struggled to fight other opponents. The fat man realized that in his previous life, he had no time to train at all. Cha Mu Yul came to the conclusion that he could still learn boxing, but when the guy realized the fact that he wanted to learn another skill, his body was not trained enough and too weak for something new. On top of all these techniques, the young man had a pretty good stamina. After analyzing and his personal calculation, the fatty decided something that with such a body and with such a status window, he could easily return to his dream once more. Suddenly, a very angry guy walked into the school office where the fat bastard was sitting. He furrowed his eyebrows and asked a question regarding the whereabouts of the disgusting fat man. The bully came closer to Cha Mu Yul and aggressively asked the guy about whether he had beaten up his comrade. The fatty was well aware of the fact that after the fatty's recent victory over Zhong Youngwoo and Hong Kwang-woo, rumors spread very quickly throughout the school building. The piece of fat agreed with the words of the school bully without emotion, and after that, Cha Mu Yul swung around and hit the young man in the cheek with his fist so hard that his head was spinning in different directions. After this blow, the school bully immediately ran out of the office. He ran so fast that he almost fell. When he was near the exit, the offender shouted loudly that the fat man did not touch him and voluntarily spared him. Cha Mu Yul was sitting near the cabinets. He held a few teeth in his palm. The fat bastard was thinking that this would all be over if he beat up the school bullies as soon as possible. But as it turned out, it wasn't that simple and things were starting to take a turn. The fat bastard was wondering why kids couldn't control their emotions. Suddenly, a girl approached the outcast. She had brown eyes and brown like chocolate hair. She leaned closer to the fat man and shouted loudly that the guy was very good at fighting. From the looks of it, the stranger looked quite harmless, a school uniform and a black phone in her hands. At this moment, 6 school bullies gathered in some garage where different things were stored. They were discussing Cha Mu Yul and how he bullied the guys that day. The guy in the blue sweatshirt shouted angrily about how this fat bastard had learned how to box in a small amount of time and had beaten them all in just a few days. His comrade in the white shirt standing behind him and silently watching everything going on in that garage. Baek Ju-sung stood with a smile on his face and couldn't believe what his buddies said. The guy laughed loudly while holding a cigarette in his mouth. He said that the fatty probably needed to go through some more training. As suddenly, the 2 guys who had suffered the publication from the fat man yelled for the head to stop and not go anywhere. Baek Ju-sung's comrade told him to calm down. He added that Young Moo says so because still doesn't know about the head being very good at judo. After saying that, Baek Ju-sung turned around and with a smile on his face told the guys that he didn't care about how many techniques that fat bastard had learned. The young man added that they should go and teach that pig a lesson once and for all. The stranger smilingly looked at the outcast. She said that the guy was very unusual and then asked him a question about where he learned to fight. Cha Mu Yul turned to the girl and asked her to stop following him. The fat man added that she was in the men's restroom and he would like to pee in peace. The people who were in the same stall with the 2 of them looked surprised at what was happening. Cha Mu Yul leaned over to the sink to wash his hands. At that moment, the girl came over and said that she didn't care where the fat man went because she would find information about him anyway. The fat bastard thought that the stranger was crazy. When the outcast was wiping his hands, the schoolgirl told him that it was a good time to catch some hooligans and beat them up. The guy replied that he was not interested in that at all. When the stranger heard this answer, she asked the fat man a question regarding what then aroused his interest. Cha Mu Yul looked forward with a serious face. He was well aware of the fact that he needed to enter MMA, but for the rematch itself, the guy needs to get into a professional league for young and promising fighters. When the guys were leaving the restroom, the outcast remembered his past life, namely how he once won a gold medal in a fight. The guy asked himself a question regarding whether he should start boxing again. At that moment, a stranger approached him with a complaint. She said that the guy never answered her question. As the fat bastard exited the restroom, he bumped shoulder to shoulder with the young man. The fat man, with no emotion on his face, raised his dark eyes upward to see who he bumped into. He looked at the freak with anger and hatred and shouted loudly that he was going to answer for all the things he had done not so long ago. The head of the school bullies decided to use his judo skills. He hit the outcast in the stomach so hard that the torso of the fat man flew back. The stranger covered her mouth with the palm of her hand, as she was shocked and did not expect such a turn of events. The bully's comrade held the stranger's hands so that she wouldn't make unnecessary movements. Baek Ju-sung slapped the girl's thighs and asked a question regarding what the bitch was doing in the men's restroom. The fat man was lying on the floor and the two guys were standing scared near him. The bully aggressively asked them what they were doing here, and after that, the head added that the guys better get out of here before he hit them too. After the two guys ran away, the fat bastard tilted his head down and frowned his eyebrows and aggressively said the guy's name, Baek Ju-sung. The school bully came closer to Cha Mu Yul and said he had no right to call him that as he was not his friend. The fat man replied that he knew that Ju was looking for him. He asked the bully a question about what he wanted. Baek Ju-sung stuck out his tongue and angrily asked the fat freak if he even remembered about the video. The phone showed a little bit of footage of the moment where the fat guy was standing in his underwear and jumping up. The school bully said that it wasn't over yet and what he showed was the last video taken. The bully added that today, they will shoot another one. After the fat freak saw that video, he felt very unpleasant, and with a serious face, he threw his offender's phone on the floor. Baek Ju-sung didn't expect this at all. He looked at the phone flying down in surprise, and after that, he shouted loudly, calling the guy a fat bastard. Cha Mu Yul saw that the opponent's attention was focused on the phone, so he decided not to hesitate and hit Baek Ju-sung. The fat man with all the hatred and anger swung his fist and hit the school bully with his fist in the face. The attack was so strong that he leaned back. The two accomplices of the bully, who were standing at the entrance of the restroom, were shocked that some fat bastard was able to hit their buddy, who was practicing judo. The stranger was also very surprised. She stood with her mouth open and watched what was happening between the guys. Baek Ju-sung's cheek began to redden, and after a few seconds, it was swollen from the outcast's blow. The school bully looked at his opponent confusedly, and there was anger and misunderstanding in his eyes. He didn't understand how the fat bastard was able to hit him. Cha Mu Yul's shadow was falling on him, and because of that, he looked quite creepy. The outcast, looking at his assailant, suddenly remembered that he needed to find the one who was his target for revenge. The fat bastard was curious about who Baek Ju-sung really was. After Baek Ju-sung came to his senses, he fiercely attacked the fat bastard with his fists. But alas, his judo skills didn't help him, and Cha Mu Yul deftly dodged every blow from the school bully, because he couldn't hit the fat guy. The head was very angry and shouted loudly that he didn't understand what was going on here. Cha Mu Yul easily avoided all the attacks and jumped back a few steps. There was no emotion on the fat bastard's face, and from far away it looked like he was flying in the air instead of standing still. The left side of the school bully was swollen even more. He looked fearfully at the fat creature and did not understand what had suddenly happened to him, because only a few days had passed since the moment when the bullies could easily bully him. The guys stood opposite each other. Cha Mu Yul didn't hesitate long and got into a fighting stance. While Baek Ju-sung waved his hands in different directions, the fat bastard realized that he had to strike, but he had to keep his distance. Baek Ju-sung aggressively burst out of his seat and ran towards the outcast. He had set his goal, which was to grab the fatty by the collar and end it once and for all. At this moment, the fat pig was already ready for the enemy's attack and was in a fighting stance. But alas, the school bully once again faced defeat. The fat bastard was ahead of the guy and struck first. The outcast once again attacked his opponent in the face. Thus, Ju-sung once again leaned back and clots of blood flew out of his mouth. Baek Ju-sung's drool flew around and the lower part of his lip was smashed. He closed his eyes and shouted loudly that he didn't understand how the pig was able to attack so cleverly. The guy's comrades had been watching their rivalry since the beginning. They were also shocked by the outcast's skills because they had not expected such a turn of events. The fat bastard continued to deliver his blows to the school bully's body. The young man on the left asked his buddy about whether they should somehow get involved in this fight, thus helping their buddy. Chu-won replied that Baek Ju-sung had told the guys to stay out of this fight anyway and just watch from the sidelines. Chu-won watched the fight fearfully and didn't know at all what kind of ending to expect. He also decided to add that Ju-sung was practicing judo and he didn't see any point in worrying about the guy. The guys continued their fight as suddenly, the school bully got very lucky and managed to grab Cha Mu Yul by the top layer of his clothes. The bully shouted loudly and joyfully that he had finally caught the guy. Before Baek Ju-sung realized that after all this time, he had finally managed to capture the fat outcast and would be able to punish him for all the things the guy had done a few days earlier. The school bully shouted loudly that the fat guy was going to die right now. But as soon as the offender got excited, he immediately received a pass in his teeth. He should have been less excited and attacked while he had the chance. Ju-sung's mouth was bleeding again, which scattered to the sides along with his saliva. Cha Mu Yul did not stop hitting the school bully. He hit him from different directions and without any regret. The fat man remembered the moments when he was bullied by the guys and became even more aggressive. Teeth and blood clots flew out of Baek Ju-sung's jaw. The bully could not take revenge on the guy, even though he was practicing judo. Baek Ju-sung fell down. He spread his legs and arms and lay motionless on the cold toilet floor. The school bully's comrades were shocked at what the fat bastard was doing. They looked at Cha Mu Yul with frightened faces but couldn't say anything. And the girl was smiling and holding her phone strangely. It looked like she was filming everything. The fat man raised his hands up and shouted loudly and joyfully that he had finally accomplished his combat mission, which involved collecting about 30 teeth from the school bullies. Baek Ju-sung's buddies were frightened and sweat was slowly dripping down their faces. They opened their eyes wide and looked at the end of the fight between the guys and couldn't understand how their friend could lose so easily to the fat bastard. The stranger was looking at the whole creepy scene with her mouth open. Toward evening, the fatty came home, made his bed and changed his clothes, and after that, opened the spreadsheet in front of him to see his completed tasks. He shouted loudly and joyfully that he had gotten 20 points for that tooth mission. Cha Mu Yul asked himself a question regarding what he could do with the points he had gotten. Cha Mu Yul looked at the table to see what he was doing the worst. As it turned out, it was wrestling in jiu-jitsu. The guy thought about it and then said that wrestling used to be the most difficult activity in his life. He added that even though the sport was good for wrestling, he still needed to learn jiu-jitsu, otherwise he would have no choice but to lose in a fight. The fat bastard decided that if he really wanted to become a real MMA fighter, he should learn jiu-jitsu well. After he clicked on the spreadsheet, a bunch of different moves started to appear and pop into the fat bastard's head. The outcast got up from the floor, clenched his fist, and confidently spoke about how all those techniques immediately came to his mind and he was now a jiu-jitsu master. The guy looked down and said that all the new information immediately entered his head. Cha Mu Yul was well aware of the fact that it would take him a very long time if he continued to study at school. Suddenly, the future athlete stopped talking. He tilted his head down and looked at his horrible, fat body, and after that he said that the very last thing he had left was to take care of his body and get rid of the extra fat. Even though it was already late outside, the young man changed into a black tracksuit, put on his running shoes and ran out into the township to go jogging. He persistently and non-stop ran forward in order to achieve the desired result as soon as possible. The hooligans gathered in the same room again to talk about the bathroom incident. The guy with the shaved back of his head asked his buddy across the hall about who Cha Mu Yul really was. He also asked a question regarding whether the fat bastard was originally good at boxing. The beaten bully had a band-aid on his cheek and lower jaw on the right side and a cigarette in his mouth. Baek Ju-sung aggressively asked his friend to shut up now because he felt much worse after his words. The guy who had a shaved back of his head turned to Ju-sung and asked him what he thought of the situation, and after that, asked another question regarding whether the guys were going to teach the fat bastard a lesson. Ju-sung called the comrade a complete idiot and added that Cha Mu Yul was too good at fighting. After this line, there was complete silence. All the guys silently looked at each other without saying a word. The young man who was sitting next to Baek Ju-sung suddenly spoke. He said that if the head would let him, he could take revenge on the outcast. Tilting his head slightly sideways, the guy asked Ju-sung about the whereabouts of that fat bastard. The school bullies started to have a vote. While Cha Mu Yul's abusers were voting, the guy was trying hard and doing physical activities outside. He was practicing kicks in the air. Even though he was overweight, the fat man did not dare to give up. His plan was to reach his dream, no matter how difficult it was. Suddenly, the fat bastard's training was stopped by Yoon-min. She asked the guy if he always does that. Cha Mu Yul thought that question was not correct and asked again. The girl asked the fat bastard a question about why boxers breathe through their mouths and how it helps them. The outcast with a serious face replied that it is just a habit of his. Yoon-min replied with a smile on her face that it was a very unusual habit of mouth breathing, and after that, asked the fat bastard that next time, he should go to the girl's new channel and help her with the video. Cha Mu Yul said he wasn't interested and continued doing push-ups on the floor. The girl replied that he should be grateful to her since a channel with 700,000 subscribers invited the fat bastard for an interview. The fatty didn't pay any attention to the girl. He silently trained until Yoon-min asked him about whether he wanted to become a real fighter, and that was why they were training so hard. Cha Mu Yul turned around and looked at the schoolgirl in surprise. The girl took out her phone and showed the news about boxing. She said that there is a general training program for fighters, in which the winner will receive 200 million won, and also, will be able to join a gym. The fat bastard picked up his phone and started reading the news. Yoon-min added that all the beginners in martial arts are very excited to join this training. The girl said that she thought that the guy is already aware of all these events since practicing hard. Cha Mu Yul saw Chon Yong-gil in the picture. He remembered all the events from his past life, and after that, the realization came to him that revenge against the director was now possible. Suddenly, the fat bastard saw a video on his phone of him fighting with a bully in the school bathroom. Yoon-min said that when the fat bastard was fighting with Baek Ju-sung, someone was filming them secretly, and besides, the stranger edited the video as if Cha Mu Yul was just beating up the bully. Everyone in the chat room was puzzled and laughing from the fight. The girl asked a question to the outcast as to what they should do now. The outcast frowned his eyebrows and said that Baek Ju-sung was a total jerk. And after that, the future fighter turned to the girl and confidently told her that she should help him. Cha Mu Yul created a live chat. He sat confused and read what people wrote to him. Most of Yoon-min's fans were asking about where the girl was now and asking for her back. The other half of the people were saying it was a scam and the guy was crazy. The fat bastard looked at the camera and confidently said his name. And after that, the guy said that the reason he borrowed Mina's channel was to discuss that viral video on the internet. The chat room immediately turned negative on the outcast, with people calling Cha Mu Yul a thug and saying that the guy was just pretending to be a victim. All the watchers were shocked. Cha Mu Yul said in a serious tone of voice that Mina's fans were right and he was the one who beat up Baek Ju-sung. After that, the outcast said that he knew that the bully was watching the live broadcast. Through the internet, the fat bastard told the bully that he would kill him soon. Ju-sung Baek clenched his teeth with intense hatred as he was shocked and extremely angry from this situation that had unfolded throughout the entire school. In just a few days, Baek Ju-sung was sitting on the tile and was under stress. After the broadcast ended, the bully called the fat guy a crazy bastard. Ju-sung asked his buddy a question regarding what they should do now, and after that, he added that Cha Mu Yul would really come after the bully soon. The ringleader was furious at these words. He shouted loudly that he had nothing to fear since the public was on their side. Baek Ju-sung asked his buddies what the fat bastard would do if they decided not to resist his actions at all. The fat bastard leaned on the window opening and with a serious face, asked the guys a question regarding what he was going to do. Behind the fat bastard stood Yoon-min and smiled achidically, and in her hands was a phone that was on a tripod. After Cha Mu Yul heard no response from the school bully, he made a frightening grimace and replied in a low voice that he should beat the bully until he started to fight back. The fat bastard's pupils shrank and a small smirk appeared. He said in a quiet voice that he would let Baek Ju-sung choose two options. The first was for the fatty to beat him up and only then he would start to fight back, or the second option, the offender would be beaten up during the fight. One of Mina's fans wrote in the chat that they should report the publisher to the emergency services. Cha Mu Yul turned to the camera and said that the caretaker is right and added to tell others about everything. And also, the fat man named the place where all this was happening, namely the backyard of Kyungmoka High School. This video was the real-time video that other users were now searching most often. The school bully looked at the crazy bastard with fright, and cold sweat slowly dripped from his face. The guy didn't know what he should do in this situation. The perfect thought flashed through his mind. He thought about just running away, just to avoid standing next to the fat man. Cha Mu Yul said with a smile on his face that Baek Ju-sung shouldn't even think about running away, because if he ran away, the fat man would catch up with him and then finish him off once and for all. Min Yoon continued to broadcast live from her phone. It was obvious that the girl was experiencing some kind of joy from everything that was happening. The outcast started to say that the school bully just wanted to go and complain to his mother that her little boy was being bullied. Cha Mu Yul said that judging from the unhealthy behavior of the bully, the young man grew up in a dysfunctional family. From all these words, Baek Ju-sung became furious. He clenched his teeth tightly and frowned his eyebrows extremely hard. Baek Ju-sung was very angry and shouted loudly about how he was never once afraid to fight a cum jerk. He aggressively took off his shirt and threw it on the floor. Cha Mu Yul happily said that this is exactly the Ju-sung he knows. After these confident words from the bully, the fatty took out and threw the red boxing gloves and the helmet for protection on the floor. Cha Mu Yul added for his opponent to take and put it on himself. The school bully angrily kicked things hard and shouted loudly for the fat man to fuck off because he didn't need it. Cha Mu Yul asked his rival if he was sure he really didn't need it. The outcast didn't make concessions and didn't persuade his attacker to obey and put on his defense as he had asked. Cha Mu Yul shouted that this time the fight would be fair. The fat bastard swung to strike, but Ju-sung didn't react in time and was punched in the face. The fat bastard was clearly delivering a blow to the torso of the school bully. Mina's fans who watched this live broadcast were totally perplexed. They considered the fact that the fat guy is just beating up the guy and the guy should as soon as possible call and report it to the police. The outcast's final punch was extremely strong. He took a big swing and hit Baek Ju-sung in the stomach so powerfully that he flew into the wall. The school bullies scattered to the sides and looked at their buddy in surprise as he landed in a pile of miscellaneous and unnecessary trash. In the chat started to write that the fat man has overstepped his bounds and is getting himself into a lot of trouble. One of the fans reported that the emergency services will soon arrive at the backyard of Gungmoka's school because the caretaker called and reported the fight to the police. As suddenly, two men in police uniforms ran out from behind Cha Mu Yul. They shouted for all the co-conspirators to stay in their seats and after that asked the guys a question regarding what they were here to do. The live chat started writing on the live chat that school violence should be seriously punished and that the police officers should not be slow to send this fat monster to jail. Baek Ju-sung pointed his finger at the outcast and shouted loudly to Mr. Policeman that the fat bastard had attacked him and beaten him almost to death. Yoon-min continued to enter the broadcast even though there was an emergency service nearby that was called by one of her fans. After that, the school bully shouted joyfully that now Cha Mu Yul's whole life would be ruined and the fat guy was finished. But the course of events completely changed. The police came to Baek Ju-sung, who was sitting on the floor, and one of the employees of the rescue service sat down and put handcuffs on the school bully. The guy was in complete bewilderment. As he did not understand why it was on him, they put them on and not on the fat man. The police officer looked at the guy with a cold stare, and after that, in a gruff voice said that Baek Ju-sung was arrested on the charge of publishing over a minor. He added that the young man had the right to remain silent. The bully was very angry after being handcuffed and told that he was arrested for bullying a minor. Ju-sung stretched his arm forward and pointing his finger at the fat bastard, said that the police were talking bullshit and they should arrest someone else. At that moment, Cha Mu Yul stood with a smile on his face, with his phone in his hands. The fat jerk waved his hand in different directions to attract the attention of his opponent. The fat man said that all this time, he had been saving all kinds of videos and pictures of Ju-sung bullying him. The outcast added that it was the school bully who got into trouble, not him, and by doing so, Ju-sung had completely ruined his life. Two police officers took Baek Ju-sung under their arms and started to take him away from the backyard of the school. Yoon-min's fans could not verify that this video was real and the victim of the publishers just decided to take revenge on his abuser. One caretaker wrote about being a student of Kyungmak High School, and this fat guy in a small amount of time became a famous pariah in the whole district. The live broadcast continued, and in the chat room below the broadcast, they began to write about how the outcast was really good at fighting. All the watchers were very curious to know why this guy had been bullied so cruelly by everyone for a long time. Cha Mu Yul looked at his opponent with a serious face, and after a few seconds, he remembered Malcolm X's words. The fat man said that Malcolm was an African-American, Islamic and spiritual leader, as well as a fighter for black rights. Cha Mu Yul said that this leader did not call such actions violence, for everything was done in self-defense. Malcolm preferred to call it intelligence. The fat bastard confidently said that he had been an outcast for quite a long time, and every day, the school bullies collected pocket money from him, as well as humiliated him and beat him in every possible way because he was overweight and could not fight back. For this reason, Cha Mu Yul had learned boxing, as he had a great desire to become a reasonable person. The school bullies listened attentively to the outcast and didn't interrupt him in any way. Cha Mu Yul said that he would gladly accept any punishment for beating up Baek Ju Sung, and after that, the fat bastard added that he did it to protect himself and nothing more. The fat bastard said that by studying martial arts, he found what he really wanted to do his whole life. Yun Ming continued filming. She was happy as she noticed the fact that the number of viewers started to increase rapidly. The outcast continued talking and talked about how he wanted to become stronger, not only to be free from publishing and all sorts of violence, but also to fight with more experienced people and learn new things. Outcast said that this is the reason why he wants to participate in the tournament, which was called Real Fighter. All the people who watched this livestream were thrilled with the fat guy's words. One fan wrote in the chat that he thought the fat jerk was a bully, but it turned out that this guy is really cool and deserves all the respect. This video spread so fast that CEO Jang Yong-gil himself saw it. He said that even if it was a coincidence, it was all very strange, as the fighting styles of the two guys with the same names were very similar. The punch and step were identical. The secretary of the head of the office, Woo Huin-chul, said with a serious face that this is really all very strange, and even if we accept the fact that the names of these two guys are just an amazing coincidence, the similar fighting style can no longer be justified in any way. Jang En-gil turned off the monitor and said that it was just a coincidence and nothing surprising, adding that Cha Mu Yul was not the kind of person who would secretly train the receiver, as the athlete was too busy fighting and training. The principal turned to the secretary and told him with a smirk on his face that if this was such a viral event, he didn't think about the fact that there would be any reason not to visit and talk to the fat man soon. Woo Huin-chul replied that the problem is that the guy is still a minor and he is afraid that this fact will have a bad influence on middle and high school students. The head questioned his secretary regarding whether he even knew the principle of their business. Jang Yong-gil, holding a cigarette in his lips, said that they don't have to be clean in this business field and Mr. Wu should take it a little easier. The CEO added that it's easier to make money by giving people what they want to see. Jang Yong-gil said that people have always liked to watch people fight since time immemorial, and he still believes in this instinct. The man said that it started from the village dog fights and ended up in the basement fights that were a hobby for rich people. The CEO inhaled the smoke from his cigarette and told his partner that this instinct has never waned. The man flicked the ash from his cigarette and said there could be no negative public opinion reaction to the education sector, and after that, laughed out loud. Chan Yong-gil's face looked rather creepy. The man was smiling suspiciously, and his fingers kept holding the cigarette. He said that he guaranteed that even the Minister of Education would be watching their real fighter named Cha Mu Yul. A short while later, the four fighters were sitting in the locker room. They were preparing for the fight that would take place very soon. Brawlers magazine journalist and martial arts expert Han Ji-ju turned to his partner Kang Haimin. He said that in 2 minutes of the round you need to make 3 effective strikes, and he thinks that it is too difficult for the first qualifying round. The girl did not agree with the opinion of her partner. She said that the young man should look at the fighters who have been trained by RFC and only then make your conclusions. The first fighter, named Chang Chun-min, had a phantom level. The second young man with a dark skin color was named Bok Crossen and had a light level. And the third fighter, whose name was Chai Won-ji, had a medium level of combat training. Kang Haimin said that the fighters were among those who could fight at their respective levels. The girl asked about those 3 hits, and after that, she said she thought they should consider 1 hit as a miracle. Then Han Ji-ju questioned the reporter about why she thought the coaches made the rule of 3 hits. Kang Haimin replied that President Chan most likely designed the new requirements to make it easier for him to choose a fighter to his liking. The reporters came to one conclusion and decided what the CEO is a very old-fashioned man. The young man asked his partner whether the new athlete would be able to show himself at his best. The journalist replied that she hoped that the guy would be able to cope and show himself in all his glory, even if he could not perform effectively. After that, the girl added that right now, Cha Mu Yul is the creator of martial arts themed releases. She wondered if the fat man is doing well since it's been a few months since that viral video came out. Suddenly, Kang Haimin turned back sharply. Her partner asked her a question regarding what she saw there. The girl replied that she just saw the appearance of a new martial arts athlete. Han Ji-ju put his hand on her forehead and shouted loudly that they should interview the guy. Then the reporter replied that she must have imagined everything. The young man was warming up his body before the fight, and Yun Ming was still standing with a tripod in her hands and broadcasting live to her channel. Cha Mu Yul said with pride in his voice about being in his best condition now. The fat guy was not recognizable at all. He didn't look like a fat outcast like before. The guy had lost an extremely large amount of weight in these few months, and his body was in athletic shape. Kong Hai-min knew that Chai Won-ji, in addition to his kickboxing skills, also has wrestling skills. The reporter added that in offense and defense, the guy has his own personal advantages. At that moment, Yoon Min walked over to the guys. She had a tripod in her hands that was holding a phone. She asked the man to move a little bit just for a couple minutes. Han Ji-ju asked again, and his partner asked a question regarding what happened. Han Ji-ju looked at the girl and then asked her loudly about whether she was new to YouTube. The fat man's friend was surprised that the man recognized her. The man took out his phone and happily told Yoon Min that he had subscribed to her. The journalist turned her head and asked Han Ji-ju in a disgruntled voice about who this girl was and why he had become so loud. He replied that this girl has 800,000 followers and as of today, Yoon Min is the hottest newcomer. The reporter asked the girl a question regarding what a newcomer in the beauty industry is doing at a martial arts competition. Cha Mu Yul's friend replied that lately, she has developed an interest in rough stuff. A guy came into the ring. He had rough facial features, and the body of the athlete himself had a little extra weight. This young man used to be a famous gang leader, and it was no wonder at all why the guy looked like that. One day, he went up to the bullies and beat them up, under the pretext of teaching the guys a good lesson. The referee stopped the fight. The challenger was Choi Seol-do. He lasted quite a while. Maybe that's where it ends. But for a challenger fighter, it's impressive as the athlete lasted until halfway through the second round. The man said that if things continue to go on like this, he doesn't know if a successful candidate will be found today. The partner replied for Han Ji-ju not to worry and just watch on. Jang Yong-gil took the microphone and joyfully started his speech. He said that this was their first participant with such a high fighting spirit, and even though it was a dangerous place, they guaranteed that all the guys would find their best way. The CEO shouted for the audience to support the fighter named Choi Suk-do. He said for the young man to join them and start making all his dreams come true. The guy tilted his head down and thanked the president. The reporter said that it was very obvious because Choi Suk-do had a huge fighting spirit, especially if you take his past. This story can be viral and President Chang can't help but take advantage of it. The next contestant named Cha Mu Yul started to climb the platform. A few months earlier, it was a very ordinary sunny day. The fat man and his father, sitting at the same table and eating. Cha Mu Yul looked away and realized that he had one last task left, and it could be much more difficult than collecting the teeth of the school bullies. The fat man decided that with this opportunity, he wanted to make his father proud of him. The father asked his son about why he was so serious. Cha Mu Yul replied that he had something to tell. The man told him to tell it like it is and without unnecessary pauses. The fatty shouted in a serious tone about wanting to learn martial arts. The man was not expecting such a turn of events. He asked Cha Mu Yul a question about why he was suddenly interested in martial arts games. And after that question, the father added that he didn't earn much, but he would be able to buy his son a couple of such games. Cha Mu Yul pounded on the table and angrily shouted that this was not about games at all and he meant real martial arts. The father was shocked. He said Cha Mu Yul had never even seen other athletes fight. The man questioned his son regarding whether he was okay. The fat man tilted his head down and said that after a long time he realized what he wanted to do, and so he was telling his own father about it. Cha Mu Yul added that it may be a little late to start moving into this field now, but a mixed martial arts fighter can fight until the age of 30. His father tilted his head down and told Cha Mu Yul in a quiet voice that he was glad that he had found what he wanted to do, and afterward added that it obviously hurt him as a parent to see his own son being beaten by bullies. After that, the man placed his palm on his son's shoulder and told him to try and do his best. The father added that he believes with all his fatherly heart in Cha Mu Yul. With these memories, Cha Mu Yul climbed into the ring. He looked completely different. His body has been transformed, and from the extra weight, only words were left. In his thoughts, the athlete thanked his father and added that he would be proud of his son. Everyone in the audience started cheering when the athlete entered the ring. The caretakers talked about how they had seen Cha Mu Yul on social media and he was very cool. Chai Won-ji looked at his opponent with disdain. He didn't expect Cha Mu Yul to be accepted as a fighter because it was just a school fight and the video that was filmed at that moment was nothing. The opponent took the microphone and said something that will show all these people the real skill of a professional. Chai Won-ji with a smirk on his face said about how the day he trained for has finally come. The guy added that he saw the application video of this amazing student Mu Yul. The guy said that the video shows how good Cha Mu Yul is at boxing, and for that reason, Won-ji chose boxing for today's fight category. Chai Won-ji was sure that he would make that innocent face beg, and on top of that, he could become more famous. The sportsman decided that he would kill two birds with one stone. Cha Mu Yul understood the fact that the opponent was one of General Manager Jang Yong-gil's puppets. In his past life, Chai Won-ji came to Cha Mu Yul's room and began to verbally abuse him, saying that his condition was very pathetic and the mighty athlete had become a nobody. Chai Won-ji talked about how the guy deserved all of this, and afterward, asked him a question regarding why he disobeyed the president. The opponent put his hand on the athlete's cheek and said that because of his disobedience, he ended up in the hospital and lying on that hard bed. With his thumb, he stroked Cha Mu Yul's cheek and said that he had guessed that things would go badly for the boy, but he couldn't imagine that things would turn out this way. Chai Won-ji said that he hoped Mu Yul would enjoy the place for the rest of his life anyway. Cha Mu Yul was happy that he had finally met this bastard, and after so long, he would be able to take revenge on him. The referee said about the fight starting and the popular Cha Mu Yul competing in the ring with Chai Won-ji planning to stop him. The man added that he can't wait to see if Mu Yul makes it past the elimination round. The opponent looked at the guy's body and started thinking about where best to strike. Chai Won-ji tried to hit his opponent with a sharp arm movement, but he deftly dodged. Jang Yong-gil's puppet was puzzled that the guy managed to avoid a punch. The opponent saw the fact that Cha Mu Yul had done a bit of boxing. The referee announced that Chai Won-ji started throwing punches at his opponent as soon as the bell rang. He added that Cha Mu Yul dodged them pretty quickly. Journalists were shocked by the fight. From every punch Chai Won-ji, the athlete deftly dodged. The opponent began to swear, for he did not believe that this bastard was really a beginner. The opponent noticed that Mu Yul's fighting style really resembled that of a past athlete who, after another fight, became disabled. Han Ji-ju asked his partner in bewilderment as to why Cha Mu Yul is only retreating. The girl replied that the athlete can see the whole situation better when his defense is open. The man said that if Cha Mu Yul was hit when his defense was open, he would be finished. Chai Won-ji talked about how now it was the right time to finish off the enemy once and for all. He took a swing at Mu Yul and angrily shouted for him to die. At this point, the guy decided not to dodge the blow, as he had done earlier, but instead to launch an attack on his opponent's face. All the people who watched this fight were in complete shock. The score went in favor of Cha Mu Yul, a large number of guys cheering for it. Chai Won-ji couldn't believe that a loser like Cha Mu Yul was able to just now hit him. They drew closer to each other, and there was hatred in their eyes. But suddenly, Chai Won-ji stopped and sweat dripped from his face. As it turned out, the first round was over, with the athlete sitting in a chair and thinking about what had just happened. Cha Mu Yul understood the fact that the bell had rung just before the opponent was about to become more aggressive. A spreadsheet popped up in front of the young man's eyes, and it said that if you defeat a professional, you can get 100 points. Cha Mu Yul took his gaze to the left and realized about the fact that he could score some points. The guys came up to Chai Won-ji and started telling him to just use his legs in the fight. The athlete replied that he would only use his hands, as he said earlier. The guy on the right said that the fighter was too arrogant. Won-ji replied that he should shut up because he didn't know that this would happen. Chai Won-ji glared at his opponent and after that, called him a whore. He couldn't believe that rookies were able to react so quickly. Cha Mu Yul sat across from the athlete and realized something, that Chai Won-ji definitely had some experience. The second round began. Mu Yul came to the conclusion that he should show his opponent who the real professionals were. Suddenly, Chai Won-ji grabbed his opponent by the neck and struck him in the stomach. Cha Mu Yul did not expect this turn of events at all. He could not react in time to protect his body. The referee said about Chai Won-ji using techniques from dirty boxing, and since this is MMA, this attack should be considered a good strategy. The CEO puppet thought about the fact that even if he can't use some leg kicks, dirty kicks should be allowed, since the athlete only uses attack with his hands. He pressed his entire body onto Cha Mu Yul and asked him a question regarding whether or not this situation made the opponent plunge back to the old days. Chai Won-ji thought about how Mu Yul would gradually start to fear him, since the pathetic high school student had no experience in this matter. After that, the fighter said that he thought about how all the fucking outcasts were bullied just like Cha Mu Yul. After saying those words, Cha Mu Yul became furious. He punched his opponent straight into his stomach, so hard that he twisted from the attack. The professional athlete began to swear. He couldn't believe that the high school student was not reacting to the attacks in any way. Chai Won-ji understood the fact that he shouldn't let the guy out of this corner by any means. Every time Chai Won-ji tried to strike his opponent, he deftly dodged in different directions, thus preventing himself from being hit. The experienced fighter couldn't understand what this brat was doing and how he had so much martial arts skill. Chai Won-ji would easily overpower his opponent if he could use his legs. As Mu Yul cornered the athlete, he noticed the CEO looking at Chai Won-ji with disdain and hatred. The novice athlete did not spare his opponent at all. He struck one blow after another. Cha Mu dodged and shouted that he would destroy that bastard once and for all, and after that, swung his arm. But suddenly, the high school student dodged the attack from his opponent again. Cha Mu Yul stood up and punched the experienced fighter in the jaw so hard that blood flew out of Cha Mu mouth. The athlete was shocked. He leaned back and blood kept flying out of his mouth. Cha Mu didn't understand how this could happen. After all, he was definitely faster than the novice fighter. Cha Mu felt the same feelings as when he competed against boxing legend Cha Mu Yul. As a high school student, specifically targeting the gap and trying to direct the opponent's actions, just like the past Mu Yul. The referee said that fighter Cha Mu Yul doesn't give his opponent a moment to rest, while fighter Cha Mu keeps his guard up but doesn't really try to find a gap to attack. This high school student kept reminding Cha Mu of that bastard who ended his life in a hospital bed. After all, the athlete's eyes have always been his problem, as arrogance reigned in them. What was thought to be impossible just happened. All the viewers did not expect this outcome. The movement, ability, defense, and dodging showed that the senior was much more than just an amateur. Cha Mu understood the fact that he would be fucked if things continued at this pace. He didn't want to realize that he might lose in this fight. He looked at Chang Yong-gil, who crossed his arms and looked at his experienced martial arts student with disdain. Cha Mu shouted something that while they were at it, he should do more than just boxing. The athlete ran over to Cha Mu Yul and grabbed his stomach. The experienced fighter furrowed his brows and aggressively told the little bastard to say goodbye to his hobby once and for all. Cha Mu Yul was well aware of the fact that he was only focusing on strikes and this situation was not favorable for him at all. After that, the novice fighter wrapped his arms around his opponent's neck and spoke about how now he could easily handle something like this. Jang Yong-gil and his secretary who was sitting next to him were shocked. The faces of the journalists looked very surprised. As it turned out, Cha Mu Yul decided to use jiu-jitsu techniques. He performed a chokehold called the guillotine. The jury knew that the novice athlete is not bad in boxing, but as it turned out, the high school student had a secret weapon that no one even guessed. Han Ji-ju was surprised at what the newcomer did, as he performed the chokehold correctly even though it looked a bit clumsy. The man said he secretly filmed the fight. He asked Kang Hai-min about whether they would have problems afterwards. The partner fist bumped back and said Han Ji-ju did well. The journalists were sure that by any means necessary, they had to capture this moment on video. Cha Mu Yul took his opponent by the neck and started to press him to the floor, thus encouraging him to win. Cha Mu couldn't accept the fact that he could lose to a high school student in this match. All the spectators were shocked by this fight. The referee stopped the match and the challenger was Cha Mu Yul. He shouted his victory joyfully to the entire hall. The high school student proved what expectations were false and he defeated the fighter Cha Mu. The combat mission to defeat the professional was accomplished and the novice fighter was rewarded with 100 points. After the difficult match, Cha Mu Yul went to the sports field where he mainly practiced. The high school student understood the fact that he had passed the first stage and now it was time for the finals. CEO Chang Yong-gil came to a great rage. He was very angry because the novice fighter won 2 rounds in a row against an experienced athlete. The man took the microphone and spoke happily about what was a very unexpected turn of events. He added that the fight between the two guys reminded him of a well-planned MMA match. Cha Mu Yul took the microphone, turned to the president and thanked him for such words. The athlete said that it was the result of his long practice and efforts to join the RFC. After that, the president said that while watching the athlete, he remembered the good old days. He began to speak for the late Cha Mu Yul in whom he had always been fond of. The director covered his face with his hands and talked about how he should have stopped the late fighter from participating in a non-weight class match, and if he had paid attention earlier, things would have been different. But now, Cha Mu Yul had left them, leaving only an inheritance. Jang Yong-gil said to give the audience a round of applause for candidate Cha Mu Yul. The athlete tilted his head down and thanked the president for the warm words. The athlete sat down on the simulator and breathed out a sigh of relief. He was burning with the desire to kill the despicable director Yong-gil, but decided that he could not hurry and should be very careful. The guy came to the conclusion that at the moment, he needed to focus on the finals. Based on the points Cha Mu Yul got in his match with Cha Mu, he was able to raise his jiu-jitsu skill to D level, but it cost him 10 points and the fighter is thinking about it being quite expensive. Cha Mu Yul decided what he needed to improve his fitness according to the skills he had. As the young man was wiping his sweat from his face, someone approached him and greeted him. As it turned out, it was a brawler's journalist named Kang Hai-min, holding a tin can of soda in her right hand. The athlete looked up and asked the girl a question regarding how she knew he was here. The reporter replied that she wanted to meet him, so she came to the court. She added that she liked his last match. The high school student thanked Kang Hai-min and extended her hand to pick up the drink. The girl sat down next to the fighter and said that she had reviewed the match several times, and then asked him a question regarding whether his last sentence was prepared or improvised. The aspiring athlete scratched his head and said with awkwardness in his voice that it was his training time and he could not communicate with the journalist. Kang Hai-min apologized and said that she would only ask one small question regarding whether Cha Mu Yul had anyone in mind, since soon he would need to choose a mentor for the final match. After this meeting, the journalist went to her partner's office and told him that Cha Mu Yul did not answer even her shortest question. She added that it was most likely her fault, as the girl visited the athlete during his training. She said that anyway, this time, there will be a final competition and the kids will have to choose one of two mentors and the winning team will get all the awards. On the left was RFC middleweight and heavyweight champion Han De-gun. On the right was a fighter named Im Jin-soo, a 15th ranked veteran with more losses than wins. Since all athletes will strive to become the best mentors, Han De-gun will only favor good fighters, so those who choose Im Jin-soo as a mentor will be excluded. The man said that those on Im Jin-soo's team would simply be sacrificed as scapegoats. Kang Hai-min realized that even though Cha Mu Yul had very good martial arts skills, he was still an amateur beginner who had been given into the hands of President Chan, where an aspiring athlete would be used for his own gain. The mentor elections began. Cha Mu Yul made his choice towards Im Jin-soo. All the fighters were shocked, because out of all 10 participants, only a high school student chose Im Jin-soo as his mentor. What this meant was that Han De-gun had to give up the remaining 4 contenders. The secretary to the head of the office, Vu Huin-shul, bent down to the president and whispered to him that they could conduct the selection of fighters anew since there were no journalists around. Jang Yong-gil with a serious face refused this idea. He said that the participants would be uncomfortable if this happened. The director also added that this situation was not that bad. The president talked about how the high school student obviously has a lot of potential, but Chang Yong-gil likes how reckless the athlete is. The director said that the novice fighter chose Im Jin-soo and it would be hard to control him. Eun-gil added that even though the guy is a beginner, he has good stage sense. Wu Huinchul bent closer and said he would act the same as last time. The CEO said it was the right thing to do and they should show the high schooler what the adult world is really like. Cha Mu Yul, along with his father, decided to watch that team competition on the TV. The aspiring fighter was upset as he realized that the editors of this TV show actually cut out the fight scenes, even the part where he fought Chai Won-ji. His father patted Cha Mu Yul on the shoulder and told him not to worry too much, as it was not his last fight, and he replied that he was fine. The high schooler thought about President Chan being a total asshole, and the fact that Mu Yul had chosen Im Jin-soo as his mentor made the whole judging system difficult. A few days later, Cha Mu Yul decided to call the journalist to ask her for a favor. Han Ji-ju was furious. He didn't understand why the fight with Cha Mu Yul was cut out. His partner replied that it was completely wrong and whoever watched the match would have known the fact that the first qualifier was Cha Mu Yul. Kang Hai-min added that this all happened most likely because Jang Yun-gil didn't like the way things turned out. The man said it was a total disgrace and the budding athlete was a huge star right on stage. The reporter replied that there's nothing they can do about it and if Cha Mu Yul is destined to succeed, he'll do it someday. Han Ji-ju agreed with his partner but added that it's a huge bummer either way. A suspicious smile appeared on the girl's face. She said as she did something. As it turned out, Kang Hai-min was not afraid and posted the proof from the RFC match to social media. The video garnered about 120,000 views and about 4,000 likes. Kang Hai-min added that if the high school student was truly destined to succeed, he would have done it any way he could, and she had only sped up the whole process. After that, the journalist said that if they had uploaded these secret footage before the broadcast, they would have had a bunch of problems, but the first qualification was already broadcast, so they had nothing to worry about. The partner agreed with the girl's words. The CEO saw the match reveal and started reading the comments under the video itself. People wrote about RFC being caught tampering and the team completely deteriorating. Jang Yong-gil went into a wild rage from what he read. Jang Yong-gil slapped the table and aggressively shouted about how the person who put this out was a complete bastard. The secretary asked a question regarding what they should do now and whether they should inform the caretakers that Chai Won-ji had requested a montage from them. The CEO put his hand on his head and replied in a quiet voice that they could have big and unpleasant consequences. So, for now, they should keep quiet about this situation. The classmates turned to the guy and one of them asked the other a question regarding whether the guy was a contestant on the show Real Fighters. He replied that he was Cha Mu Yul, who used to be bullied by the whole school. The guy added that the outcast has really transformed and now every girl is chasing after him, calling him handsome. Cha Mu Yul was sitting at the dinner table when a schoolgirl came up to him and asked him if he liked karaoke. She said with a smile on her face that after class, the guys were going to karaoke, and afterward, suggested that the high schooler go with them. The athlete exhaled and replied that today was his breast day. The guys went out into the hallway and the schoolgirl continued to follow him and persuade him to go with them. Cha Mu Yul started to reply that every next day. He has every next day scheduled and there is no way he can. Cha Mu Yul said that he was busy and asked the girl to go home. She was puzzled and thought this answer was rude. Suddenly, from behind the guy, Yoonmin appeared and asked a question regarding why he didn't like hanging out with his classmates. They walked down the hallway together. After a while, the high school student replied that they were nowhere to be seen when he was an outcast, but when he became a bit famous, his classmates immediately began to show interest. Cha Mu Yul added that despite all of this, he has something more important to do right now and would like to enjoy his time. Yoon was greatly surprised. The girl didn't expect such a turn of events. She thought about the fact that the speech was about her. The guy turned to the YouTuber and replied that it wasn't about her but about the training. Yoonmin, with awkwardness in her voice, called the athlete crazy. The athlete frowned his eyebrows and said that he needed to practice more and after that, go to Jin Soo Hyun to tell him something important. A few days later, the RFC project called The Real Fighter began. The guys were left with just the final live broadcast, all the caretakers cheering and shouting loudly throughout the room. The referee stood by the two teams and announced that the winner of the lightweight division had been decided and now, the culmination of martial arts, the middleweight bout, was ready to take place. The difference from the fierce lightweight matchup is that the middleweight fight will be a simpler one, all because Han De-gun's team is incredibly strong. The judges were curious about an aspiring athlete named Cha Mu Yul who chose Jin Soo's team. The jury wanted to see if the fighter had made the right choice. The CEO was also present at this competition. The man had a bad feeling about it. But even so, Jang Eun-gil believed that Choi Seol-do would win and become the best fighter in the match since they were halfway through this project. Jang Eun-gil took the microphone and with a smile on his face, he said that he wanted to show his respect to the two teams who had prepared very hard for this. He hoped that both teams could show impressive performances in the match. And afterwards, the president added that he would have felt better if Cha Mu Yul was the center of this match. Suddenly, a high school student snatched the microphone out of Jang Eun-gil's hands and said that with all due respect to Mr. President and all the audience, he wanted to make a certain request. Fans were furious. They were sure that the athlete just wanted to get attention. Cha Mu Yul shouted loudly into the microphone about wanting to change the structure of the match by fighting the other team alone. From such news, Cha Eun-gil stood up from his chair, and his eyes were extremely frightened. The host started to get worried and told Cha Mu Yul that it was a live broadcast. He asked the jury to turn off the athlete's microphone to prevent him from saying anything unnecessary. Suddenly, the president stood up and with a smirk on his face told the anchor that everything was fine. And after that, he invited the whole room to listen to the high school student's request. Cha Mu Yul started his speech. He said that not everyone is born a warrior and there are people who find their suitable skill through training and there are also people who don't do it at all. The senior said that with all the regret, their team is in the last category. Cha Mu Yul frowned his eyebrows and added that his team is not ready to enter the octagon yet. He aggressively shouted into the microphone about being in fights that many support and provide for. And no matter what, the fighters must fight to the very end. Cha Mu Yul looked at Jang Eun-gil and said that he believed the president shared the same sentiments as him. All the fans were ecstatic. They thought the aspiring fighter was very cool. The guys applauded and shouted at him about how they loved his attitude and how he makes everyone have more fun. In the live broadcast chat, everyone was shocked. The watchers couldn't believe that Cha Mu Yul would fight against 5 fighters. They thought the high school student was a real warrior. The whole hall was shouting to the president to allow it. Jang Eun-gil became crazy. He couldn't believe that Cha Mu Yul wanted to do all 5 matches alone. The president's pupils shrank. He thought it was delusional, for he was sure that a high school student could defeat 1 or at most 2 fighters, but no more. Jang Eun-gil thought that a 1 versus 5 match would not only get him enough attention, but would exceed his initial expectations. The CEO replied that he was pleased to see such confidence from the guy, and after that, he asked Cha Mu Yul if he could do it, because the athlete will have to fight all 5 matches for 3 minutes. Cha Mu Yul said that the CEO did not understand him at all, as the athlete was not going to fight for all 3 minutes. His plan was to finish it much sooner than the time comes out. All the fighters were shocked and bewildered. Through anger, the president acquiesced to the novice fighter's request. Everyone in the audience was happy that the request was approved, and everyone in the chat room wrote about how the old man really could revitalize the show and make it really awesome. Fans have decided that Han De-gun's team seems not weak at all and whether the novice fighter will be able to overcome these big guys, because it's no joke. The opponent couldn't believe that Cha Mu Yul would beat them in less than 3 minutes. Ken Shul concluded that the guy was very confident in his stamina, but a marathon runner like him obviously had a lot more stamina than a high school student. The mentor approached Ken Shul and told him about the fighter to beat the crap out of Cha Mu Yul, and after that, held a clinch and continued dirty boxing in order to put the daredevil in a difficult position. The guy agreed with the mentor's words. Ken Shul was furious and perplexed at what the bastard was doing, and what interested him most was where he was looking. As it turned out, a system window with a combat mission popped up in front of Cha Mu Yul's face. It said that the guy needed to become the winner of the finals and win the final match, and after that, he would get 50 points. The novice fighter looked at all his opponents and realized that this is a very large amount of points, and after he defeats all the fighters, the high school student will get 250 points. Cha Mu Yul got off the floor and ran towards Ken Shul, and after that, hit his opponent so hard that he fell backwards and blood flew out of his mouth. Cha Mu Yul knew the fact that under normal circumstances, he wouldn't have gotten so many points, but since the rules of the match had changed, he would be able to take 50 points from each opponent. Ken Shul was puzzled. He didn't understand why the high school student was so fast. The novice fighter landed one after another punches to his opponent's torso. Ken Shul couldn't keep up with his pace. Han De-gun's team looked at each other and came to the same conclusion that the athlete had gotten even stronger. There wasn't a single gram of fat on Cha Mu Yul's body. Opponents couldn't understand how one could swing like this. When Ken Shul relaxed a little, the young man struck his face so hard that he threw his head to the side and drool flew out of his mouth along with blood. The referee stopped Cha Mu Yul and approached Ken Shul. The announcer started talking about how the high school student is great as he managed to knock out his opponent in just 30 seconds. It was a great combination of punches that ended with a top hook. Kwok King Chul was never able to shine with his dirty boxing. The host shouted out that Cha Mu Yul was 3 heads taller than his opponent, and it was very interesting whether anyone could survive his series of punches. In the upper left corner, a system window popped up, stating that Cha Mu Yul had completed one of the 5 quests. The live stream chat started writing about Go Young P defeating a high schooler and maybe he's on the same level as Mu Yul. Kan Hai Min was also watching this match from her phone. She agreed with the fans' words in the chat. The girl said that the key point is shielding and the important part is to watch out for any tackle. Han Jiaiju sat in the chair and watched the match carefully, and then asked his partner a question regarding whether it was difficult to block him with just his fists. Kan Hai Min replied that yes, because there are lower grabs and it would be difficult to guess where to hit. The man asked his partner if she wanted to have an argument with him about who would win. Kan Hai Min told him to forget about it because the match has already started and Mu Yul has to choose a new strategy to win. Kan Hai Min added that Mu Yul's opponent should also come up with a plan to win because, without a strategy, there is nowhere to go. The opponent lunged at the high school student and spoke loudly about making him crawl right now. Suddenly, Cha Mu Yul put his foot forward, thus blocking Low-Key Calm's grab. The opponent was shocked. He didn't expect this turn of events. The presenter started to talk about Go Young PE started to hesitate right after low kick and the athlete must have felt a lot of pain after such a kick. Cha Mu Yul just now kicked his calf. The presenter thinks that the injury was quite severe. Gui Young Pe furrowed his eyebrows and aggressively said something about doing something before it ended in defeat. The opponent began to move towards the novice fighter in order to strike him and show who the pro is in this match. Cha Mu Yul, with complete ease in his punch, once again launched an attack into his opponent's face. It was extremely stiff. Go Young Pe's blood scattered around. The announcer spoke loudly about the second match also ended in a knockout and the referee stops the match. This time, Cha Mu Yul needed less than 30 seconds to get rid of his opponent. The high school student knocked Go Young P out of the rack with a low kick and knocked him out the moment he lost his balance. The announcer said about how it was an awesome move. Everyone was shocked by the guy's impressive skills. Go Young Pe was knocked out after a powerful counterattack from his opponent. As expected, Cha Mu Yul landed an incredibly strong punch. Han De-gun told his mentor to be careful and watch his opponent's attack. Hwang Il-ju asked if he should just be careful. Dagun agreed and added that that brat should have run out of energy and stamina by now, so it would be easier to defeat him. The host started to say that the karate champion entered the ring to fight Cha Mu Yul. This guy was known for his tenacity and was the unity fighter who was able to withstand Han Dagun's punch in the middleweight division. Hwang Il-ju was being vigilant and approaching Cha Mu Yul. He used a turtle strategy and brazenly tried to waste the high school student's energy. The opponent said about being a very tough and stubborn fighter. He added that even if Cha Mu Yul hits him, he will endure it without any problem. Cha Mu Yul decided not to be petty and hit his opponent in the right side. This attack was so strong that two of Hwang Il-ju's ribs broke and there was a look of misunderstanding on his face. The third contestant Hwang Il-ju passed out after one punch and it was quite a shocking result. The referee ran up to the fighter and looked at his body in horror. The fighter was taken away by rescue help. In the live broadcast chat began to write that Cha Mu Yul is crazy because made 3 knockouts in a row. Just one punch. The athlete even began to compare with Saitam. The reporter looked towards Han Dagun's team and said that it would be harder for the guys to think of anything now since they had lost 3 fighters and most likely the guys would send someone who could finish it. The partner agreed with the girl's words without a second thought. Kang Hai-min said it would most likely be someone who was good at jiu-jitsu. The host announced that a fighter named Pe Ji-hoon had entered the ring and of all the participants, he alone had the most impressive skills of the martial art. The athlete was able to defeat many professional fighters in jiu-jitsu using his skills. In the realm of pure grappling, even the fighter's mentor has full confidence in his skills, and that's because Pe Ji-hoon's skills are truly impressive. Pe Ji-hoon looked at his opponent who was warming up before the fight and talked about how he looked like a person who only ate grass and rice. The enemy began to run at Cha Mu Yul with thoughts of giving him a hospital rest, as suddenly, a high school student put up a block. Thus, Pe Ji-hoon was unable to launch his attack on his opponent. After that, Pe Ji-hoon bounced back a few steps to be away from the fighter. This whole incident pissed off team member Han Dagun. He decided that he would break Cha Mu Yul's leg. Pe Ji-hoon just tried the Amanari throw. It's a technique where you have to grab a person's leg by the ankle. It's not as widely used due to the higher miss rate and most likely the fighter is just underestimating Cha Mu Yul. The enemy could not believe that the former outcast had escaped this capture. Cha Mu Yul didn't miss the opportunity and immediately went on the attack. He climbed on top of his opponent and raised his arm to attack. At this moment, it was too hard for Pe Ji-hoon to block the blows. Pe Ji-hoon called his opponent a complete fucking bastard. He knew himself a question regarding whether Cha Mu Yul always knew about this technique. The high school student climbed on top of team member Han Dagun. The opponent understood the fact that he had to get out of the hold by any means necessary. After a few seconds of contemplation, Pe Ji-hoon decided to topple his opponent over himself with the words, "Why the fuck did he get on top of him?" The host started talking about how as soon as Pe Ji-hoon escaped, he decided to attack his opponent by making a toehold around the fighter's neck with his hands. There was one thing that was surprising to Pe Ji-hoon. Cha Mu Yul didn't resist his attack at all and didn't try to get out of his hands in any way. Team member Han Dagun decided to end it. He stood up a little and after that, swung to deliver a decisive blow to the senior's face. But alas, Cha Mu Yul managed to dodge and the fighter hit the floor. The former outcast took Pe Ji-hoon by the neck and pulled him towards himself to deliver a punch and end the 4 fighters once and for all. The host started talking about Cha Mu Yul's perfect execution of the hold and breaking Pe Ji-hoon's triangle. He also added that Han Dagun's teammate stands up and is about to counterpunch while the high school student continues to tightly grip his neck. The host asked the audience if the opponent will be able to get out of the grip. As suddenly, Pe Ji-hoon fell to the floor. He was unconscious. The presenter talked about how it was very impressive and Cha Mu Yul was really able to defeat all 4 contestants in a matter of minutes. After that, the athlete with a small smirk raised his hand up and the presenter added that it was very surprising and he was sure that everyone here was as shocked as they were, because now there was only one fighter left from Han Dagun's team that Cha Mu Yul would have to fight. The last fighter appeared. It was the best athlete, as well as the winner of the previous preliminary stage. Jang In-gil frowned his eyebrows and realized his mistake, namely that after he allowed Cha Mu Yul to change the rules to make the show more interesting, his whole plan had collapsed and this brat could easily become a new martial arts star. The fighter entered the ring and started laughing. He told Mr. President to watch carefully and not get distracted, and Han Dagun didn't worry because he will manage to win this high school student. The announcer announced that the next and final round of this match was starting. He added that things were going well for Cha Mu Yul as he predicted earlier. The man asked the audience a question regarding whether the aspiring athlete would make it through the 5th round. With the fighters in their seats, the announcer talked about how Cha Mu Yul is still not doing badly, even though he's a little tired. But no matter how quickly the high school student defeats his opponent, the former outcast is at a disadvantage against Choi Suk-do. On the other hand, Choi Suk-do's condition is better now than ever. At 183 centimeters tall and weighing 99 kilograms, he possesses a muscular body, and if this were a weight class bout, it would be a heavyweight versus middleweight contest. Han Ji-ju excitedly questioned his partner regarding whether Cha Mu Yul could win this match. After a few seconds, Kang Hai-min with a serious face replied that she thought that this time, the novice fighter will lose because he spent too much energy in the previous fights. The reporter added that the weight class of the athletes is very different, and if Choi Suk-do gets close to the high school student and then attacks him, Cha Mu Yul will not have any chance to win. The partner replied that he still hoped Cha Mu Yul could win. Han Ji-ju looked forward at the fighters and said that perhaps the novice athlete had a couple of aces up his sleeve. The reporter replied that when one runs out of energy, the movements gradually start to slow down and the legs start to become heavy. Choi Suk-do began to bear down on his opponent like a rabid boar, and after that, began to attack him. Cha Mu Yul realized that he could not act rashly because he might lose. The high school student decided that he needed to knock out Choi Suk-do by any means necessary. The opponent swung his fist and shouted for Cha Mu Yul to die. The high school student decided what he needed to use a different strategy, namely parrying. The presenter said that the parrying technique is not at all easy to perform with open-fingered gloves, but despite this, Cha Mu Yul uses this technique like a martial artist. The aspiring fighter dodged the approaching hand of his opponent, and after that, hit Choi Suk-do straight to the stomach. Cha Mu Yul said that Choi Suk-do was doing great, and after saying that, he punched him in the jaw saying that he would make a real chop out of the fat guy. Choi Suk-do couldn't believe that he wasn't really being beaten up by that brat. The anchor announced that Cha Mu Yul continued to throw a series of punches from close range. The opponent was able to start parrying the strikes on Cha Mu Yul. The high school student continued his offense with a series of strikes. He was very skillful. Cha Mu Yul, with great speed and force, punched the fatty straight into his stomach, and from the pain, Choi Suk-do grunted and curled up, while his nose continued to bleed. The team started shouting for Choi Suk-do to start restraining his opponent's attacking actions by tying his hands. This is done in order to rest, regain his breath or move away after a missed punch. Choi Suk-do continued to protect his head. In his mind he thought to himself, since the mentors were so smart, let them stand in his shoes. The opponent was very angry. He only wanted one thing, and that was to win. He would never be able to forgive himself for this loss. Team member Han De-gun asked a high school student a question regarding whether he even knew who he was fighting now. And afterwards, while holding Cha Mu Yul by the hair, he stuck out 2 fingers to stick them in his opponent's eyes. The novice fighter was not scared at all and did not back up. He instead grabbed Choi Suk-do's fingers. It was so strong that the opponent thought he was going to break them. The professional began to scream loudly in pain, holding on to his hand. The opponent's hands entwined, but the referee regarded it as a deliberate action and stopped the whole fight. Cha Mu Yul didn't mind this at all. He didn't care about the referee's decision at all. He continued to look down at his opponent with disdain and hatred. Choi Suk-do didn't realize what had just happened. He couldn't believe that the novice fighter was actually trying to break his arm. The fat man raised his head up and spoke about Cha Mu Yul being a real nutcase. Despite the resumption of the fight, Choi Suk-do decided to take a couple steps back. He did so unknowingly due to the fact that he was becoming afraid of his opponent. At this moment, Cha Mu Yul was confidently walking straight towards him. Cha Mu Yul looked at his opponent, and after that, asked a question regarding why he was looking like that. The high school student added so the fucking gangster wouldn't stand in one place and walk towards him. Fatty took a swing and loudly sent his opponent the fuck away. But here's the setback. Choi Suk-do is at a disadvantage. He's backed himself into a corner. The aspiring martial artist decided not to hesitate and start hitting his opponent right away. He swung his arm and then gave a sharp blow to Choi Suk-do's stomach, causing him to grunt in pain. Choi Suk-do didn't understand how the former outcast had such strength. Cha Mu Yul continued to attack his opponent. His punches were so strong that the professional had crimson-colored fist marks on his body. Cha Mu Yul shouted about beating the fat man until the fat from the fighter was completely gone. The anchor asked the viewers if Choi Suk-do would be able to get out of that corner. The pro, even though he shielded himself from the attack, he was still in a lot of pain. He didn't know how long it would last. Before Choi Suk-do finally came the realization that he was losing the match to this brat. He couldn't believe it and decided not to slowly start taking action. The opponent swung his fist and told Cha Mu Yul with anger in his eyes to shut up right now. But no matter how loudly he shouted, it didn't help him at all. Cha Mu Yul reacted much faster and struck Choi Suk-do a strong punch right in the face. As they say, the fat man was loud but safe. The jury was stunned. The secretary opened his mouth and stared at the whole fight with bewilderment, and the president couldn't accept the fact that their intended cause had burned down in just a couple minutes. And that was the end, namely the beautiful final battle. Cha Mu Yul defeated the last hope of the true fighter team. Choi Suk-do also went to knockout. Even when the high school student was at a disadvantage because of his stamina, he calmly finished the match. Kang Hai-min was also shocked. She looked at the athlete with surprise and said that he was definitely not a novice fighter, but a real monster. Jang Yong-gil took the microphone in his hands and began to speak. The man congratulated Cha Mu Yul on his victory, and also said that he really did not expect the aspiring fighter to achieve such success. The president added that it was still unbelievable to him. The president said that all of their candidates were newcomers, but nevertheless, their level was quite high. Jang Yong-gil wanted to give a huge thank you to Cha Mu Yul for being able to exceed the jury's expectations. Han De-gun took the microphone in his hands and with anger in his voice, congratulated the aspiring fighter. The man said that luck was on the high school student's side today. He added that he had fought Im Jin-soo 3 times and won each time. It was this fact that made De-gun underestimate Im Jin-soo's team members. A wry smile appeared on the team leader's face. He said that even if Im Jin-soo was weak then, he was lucky to find such strong fighters. The host said that now it was time to listen to the speech of the finalist himself. He was interested in what the main character of tonight's match, Cha Mu Yul, had to say. The fighter picked up the microphone and confidently said that he was honored and pleased to have the opportunity to showcase his skills on such a big stage like this. He added that he did not agree at all with the words of Han De-gun, who said that the victory of a high school student is just luck. Cha Mu Yul added with a smirk on his face that it was impossible to defeat 5 people with only 1 luck. And after that, he said that it was up to the audience to judge this match and how things really were. The former outcast asked the president a question regarding whether there was still time left until the end of the live broadcast. Jang Yong-gil was puzzled. He frowned his eyebrows and continued to stare at the fighter. It was because the senior finished the matches earlier than everyone had planned. The general manager asked Cha Mu Yul a question that concerned why he was suddenly worried about the broadcast. Mu Yul replied that he really respects Mr. President, but he would like to use the remaining time and propose a fight with mentor Han De-gun. The high school student was not in agreement with Han De-gun's words, who talked about how he only won because of luck, and mentor Im Jin-soo's skills were lacking. After saying those words, his team stood in complete shock. Cha Mu Yul said about how they still have some free time left anyway, and so he calls Han De-gun to have at least 1 match with him. All the caretakers were shocked. No one expected such a turn of events from a newcomer. The whole room started shouting that Cha Mu Yul was the best. The president along with Han De-gun were not happy and their faces described intense anger. Han De-gun slapped the table and turned to Jang Yong-gil in a serious tone. He asked him a question which was about whether a professional needed to enlighten a high school student. The principal didn't answer anything to this question. Jang Ye-gil began to think that this was quite a favorable situation for him. If it ended like this, the arrogant brat would get all the honors, and if the RFC champion beat him, it would be a different conversation. He thought that Han De-gun was on a completely different level, but if he made even a small mistake, Cha Mu Yul would have no trouble winning this round. The president realized that the professional was not that stupid and he could easily defeat the brat. The president concluded that Cha Mu Yul was a complete idiot and he was so intoxicated by the victory that he became overconfident, which is what happens when fighters have too much adrenaline and inevitably make such mistakes. The CEO turned to Cha Mu Yul. He said that a show fight is very different from a real match, and after that, asked the high school student about whether he was sure he wanted to do it. Mu Yul agreed with the president's words. After that, Jang Yong-gil announced to all the viewers that Cha Mu Yul would be fighting against the champion Han De-gun. There were 2 rounds of 3 minutes. The president agreed to full contact. This is when the fighters are allowed to attack any part of the body. The audience shouted loudly in the audience and cheered the new changes of the match. The president with a serious face said that he perfectly understands the desires to fight a strong opponent. He added that he respects the opinion of the aspiring fighter. The host started talking about how Cha Mu Yul continues to surprise them, and after 5 wins in the showdown, he dared to challenge the RFC champion to a fight. The man sitting next to him added that in this match, fighters can attack any part of their opponent's body. The host asked the caretakers a question regarding whether Cha Mu Yul will extend his winning streak or lose. Han De-gun started to take off his suit. Everyone was shocked when they saw his huge muscular body. The opponent had already put on his red gloves, raised his head and said in a serious voice that Cha Mu Yul might have walked away victorious from this room, but was now making a huge mistake. As suddenly, the senior interrupted him. He said with a smile on his face about the one talking too much. Cha Mu Yul added that the opponent should remember to put on the mouthpiece if he didn't want all his teeth to fall out. The champion tilted his head down and said with a crazed smile about the former outcast expecting no mercy from him. Despite the sudden provocation, Han De-gun didn't fall for it. It showed how professional he was in this matter. The champion lived up to his nickname Glacier and showed a completely calm stance. Han De-gun decided to use deceptive boxing action to guide his opponent into a lying position. The champion was doing things very quickly. After applying pressure with takedown, Han De-gun began to attack Cha Mu Yul's body. The audience wasn't thrilled with this match. They started yelling about the pro actually using wrestling techniques on the rookie. Han Ji-ju turned to his partner and said frustratedly that it was really over the top. He added that it was not right to do such actions to an ordinary person who was not a real fighter. Kang Hai-min replied that Cha Mu Yul had defeated 5 people in a row and it would not be fair if he was considered an ordinary beginner. Kang Hai-min added that this is the reason why the high schooler decided to do the match. Han De-gun wants to show the difference in their level. The reporter off-screen said something to the effect that if this continues, Cha Mu Yul will play this match, due to a very obvious reception. The girl says that Han De-gun wants to seize the lead immediately. Once the match starts, there's no way the fighter will miss the chance when Cha Mu Yul is on the ground. While the reporters were chatting, Han De-gun took his opponent by the torso and threw him against the floor. The anchor said about how it was a very powerful punch from the champion himself. Han De-gun started using a technique where one fighter puts his knee on the other's stomach in order to drain his stamina, but Cha Mu Yul still tried to resist. The champion took a swing with his arm, and afterward, questioned the high school student regarding why he challenged a pro with such poor skills. But when Han De-gun looked at his opponent's face, he immediately became silent. Cha Mu Yul's eyes were full of confidence and showed no fear. Im Jin-soo began to think. He realized that this was a very bad situation for Cha Mu Yul, and if he couldn't get out, he would receive a lot of punches on his face. And if things continued like this, he would definitely lose. Cha Mu Yul decided that he had to get out. He started to raise his hands up when suddenly, Im Jin-soo started shouting loudly for the senior to put them down now. As soon as Cha Mu Yul opened his defense, Han De-gun immediately grabbed his arm and began to paw it in order to win this fight. His opponent began to lurch in pain. The former outcast managed to twist things in his favor. He was already on top and holding his opponent's knees. Han De-gun couldn't believe that the novice fighter knew about how to get out of this situation. Cha Mu Yul was able to get out of such a horrible situation for him. It was unbelievable, especially considering the fact that he was a rookie. Han De-gun started swearing loudly. The host was just starting to say that things had changed when suddenly, Han De-gun retook the lead and Cha Mu Yul was caught off guard. The former outcast started to produce a grab to make any attack impossible. When Han De-gun realized this, he was very angry at his opponent. Cha Mu Yul looked at the champion and told him that he does talk a lot, and after that, asked his opponent a question regarding whether all RFC fighters can only fuck around and not fight. Han De-gun became extremely furious, and his body became heavier and heavier. He called his opponent a bastard, and after that, swung his hand to strike. The champion started throwing a lot of punches and didn't seem to want to stop at all. Cha Mu Yul was in a very dangerous position. He was covering his face from his opponent's fists. Im Jin-soo clenched his teeth in anger as he began to realize that the grab had no effect. Mu Yul's mentor didn't realize how far Han De-gun was going to go since his opponent was just a high school student. A moment later, Han De-gun punched the former outcast on the cheek, and after that, told Cha Mu Yul about how he was obligated to feel his fist since absolutely any professional should have felt it. Blood flowed from the senior's lips. Looking at Cha Mu Yul, it became eerie as his eyes looked crazy, and his frightening and cold gaze brought intense fear from head to toe. with his filthy mouth. Han De-gun shouted loudly about how fucked up his opponent was. He couldn't understand how long Cha Mu Yul was going to endure. After saying that, the professional once again prepared his fist to attack. But this time, luck was on the high school student's side. Just as Han De-gun was about to hit Cha Mu Yul, the bell rang, which meant that the first round had just ended. His fist was frozen near the fighter's face. The first round was over. Han De-gun had dominated throughout the round, but there was one more round to go. Cha Mu Yul made a rather bold decision as he challenged the martial arts pro himself. As expected, their levels were quite different, and Han De-gun's punches at the very end of the first round were too strong. Han De-gun looked towards his opponent, who was sitting on a chair with a towel on his head and was moving away from his attacks. The professional was fully confident that he had fully felt his punch. He added that it had been a long time since he had seen such stamina like Cha Mu Yul. The champion decided to himself that he would be careful with this high school student. Jin-soo approached his mentor and excitedly asked him if he was alright because he had a busted lip. Cha Mu Yul replied without further ado that it was nothing but a minor scratch. After that, Jin-soo told the high school student that it was time for him to stop, as it was a useless fight because the skills of the fighters were very different. The mentor added that the whole team was surprised at how far Cha Mu Yul had come. The high school student took a bottle of water, and after that he said that Jin-soo is his mentor, so he should teach him additional techniques and not talk nonsense. After saying that, Jin-soo became angry. He shouted that if he knew how to win, he would not lose 3 times. The fighter added that Han De-gun's fists are not a joke at all. Cha Mu Yul lowered his gaze and after that said that in any case, they need to find some way in order to win. The high school student added that the most important thing was for him to block Han De-gun's takedown because after this blocking, he would have a better chance of winning. Jin-soo took his mentor's hands. He shouted indignantly for Cha Mu Yul to look at himself and come back to reality. He added that the fighter has only been training for 4 weeks and there is no way he can beat the champion right now. The former outcast threw off his towel and told Jin-soo not to worry because he will find some way to win. The high school student added that even if he can't do something, it can be learned, and his plan is to destroy Han De-gun once and for all. But in the second round, it was time for the second round. Everyone couldn't wait to find out how it would end. All the spectators and jury were in great anticipation. The host said that Han De-gun won the last round, and after that, asked a fan question regarding what strategy the champion will choose in the new round. Han De-gun frowned his eyebrows. He understood what Cha Mu Yul already knew about the takedown he used earlier. The champion recognized the fact that this high school student had some martial arts skills, and if the pro used this technique again, there was a high probability that he would block this attack. A novice fighter decides that he needs to get more serious and throw the first punch. In such situations, a fighter who is good with his fists will do a left hook. The champion dodged, and after that, decided to do a takedown so that his opponent couldn't quite attack him. But at this moment, Cha Mu Yul was able to defend himself from the punch. This news came as a big surprise to everyone. Thanks to this, the high school student did not make the same mistake he had in the first round. Han De-gun decided to step back. This moment impressed the professional. He thought about the fact that the former outcast just watched a lot of matches and knows some martial arts techniques. The champion also decided that the high school student was just lucky and luck was on his side today. The martial arts professional decided that he would not change his tactics and would win his opponent by wrestling. He swooped down on Cha Mu Yul from below in order to make another takedown. The announcer again announced that this time too, the former outcast blocked Han De-gun's takedown. The champion was shocked. He didn't understand how the novice fighter managed it. Cha Mu Yul questioned his opponent about whether he was overconfident. The former outcast also shouted at him about putting all his points into the fight. After saying that, the high school student punched Han De-gun in the face so hard that he was thrown back. The score became 0-1 in favor of Cha Mu Yul. Everyone in the audience cheered loudly at the victory of the novice athlete. The host said that Cha Mu Yul landed a straight punch to his opponent's jaw, even though it was not a strong punch. Han De-gun did not expect it at all. He added that the high school student never ceases to amaze them, since the guy blocked takedown from Han De-gun twice and landed a bad punch. The reporter was shocked. He sat with his mouth open, and after that he said about Han De-gun's attempts to attack, failing tremendously. Kang Hai-min agreed with her partner's words. She added that the high school student blocked the punch twice. Kang Hai-min watched the match and afterward said that from that moment on, the course of the match changed, and what Cha Mu Yul needed most was distance, namely enough distance to attack, which came in the second round, and now the budding fighter has a good chance of winning. Cha Mu Yul began to throw many punches at Han De-gun's legs to prevent him from approaching, and after each punch, the opponent grunted in pain and looked at the high school student with anger in his eyes. Jin-soo was very satisfied with his mentor. He thundered and shouted various words of encouragement to him, but he didn't understand why Cha Mu Yul was fighting better than him. The former outcast realized that his stamina was starting to run out little by little and he should finish this match quickly, because if things continued at this pace, he would lose this round just like the previous one. Han De-gun didn't understand what to do and whether he should try to do the takedown again. From the crowd started shouting that the champion has a huge problem and they don't understand how the fighter managed to get to this level with zero martial arts skills. The professional took a deep breath, and after that, exhaled the air. He said with aggression in his voice about it being very humiliating. He couldn't believe that he really looked like a very pathetic fighter when fighting this high school student. Han De-gun decided something that he immediately had to finish with everything. Han De-gun decided to attack his opponent again. He couldn't believe that Cha Mu Yul really thought that he could beat him. After that, the champion said that he didn't care about this whole situation and his plan was to finish with the second round right now. The fighter began to run at his opponent with great speed with words about being a champion. After saying that, Han De-gun started to approach the high school student. He swung his fist to strike, but Cha Mu Yul was able to easily dodge his opponent's fist without any problems. The champion was shocked. He didn't understand how the novice fighter was able to dodge his punch so easily. Han De-gun thought that this guy had some crazy instincts. Han De-gun swung his heavy fist again, and then asked Cha Mu Yul a question regarding how he could avoid such an attack. It was obvious that the high school student had not expected such a turn of events, and this situation had frightened him a bit. As soon as the opponent's fist began to approach, Cha Mu Yul decided not to hesitate and used a strong turning kick. He turned around and attacked Han De-gun's torso with all his might. From this blow, several of the professional fighter's ribs cracked, and his face creased in very intense pain. Jin-soo was very shocked at what his mentor had done. He watched the second match with his mouth open and couldn't string together a word. The host was delighted. He said about Cha Mu Yul once again, "Did something difficult in this match?" The novice fighter parried an attack and contacted his opponent with a leg kick. He added that it was a great and totally unexpected turn of events. While the presenter was narrating the actions of the novice fighter, Han De-gun noticed one thing, and that was that the opponent wasn't moving and most likely he had reached his maximum limit. After this conclusion, the pro decided to try his luck and take another swing at Cha Mu Yul. As soon as Han De-gun's red glove came close to the former outcast's face, the match immediately ended as time ran out. The announcer announced that Cha Mu Yul had shown impressive skills in the second round. The high school student looked at his opponent with disdain. The presenter said about Cha Mu Yul being able to attack Han De-gun with 3 effective strikes, and it was a huge humiliation for the martial arts champion. The audience enjoyed the best match of their lives. They shouted Cha Mu Yul's name loudly, and it was clear that the RFC, just now, had found a rising star in the middleweight division. After the match, a lot of people came to see the new sports star to tell them about his success. Jin-soo tried to chase away the reporters with aggression. He told the guys that their team was not going to give interviews. Mu Yul's mentor added that if they don't leave now, he will use self-defense. After these words, the reporters switched to Han De-gun. At this moment, the athlete was sitting in the locker room. He was happy that all this hustle and bustle was finally over. Cha Mu Yul could not even imagine that it would be so hard and this day would be extremely tiring. But thanks to Han De-gun, the high school student managed to earn a lot of points. He pondered whether he should improve jiu-jitsu or still wrestling. Suddenly, another system window popped up in front of the guy's eyes, saying that Cha Mu Yul had reached 300 points and asking if the novice fighter wanted a more difficult mission. A few days after that match, Cha Mu Yul was sitting in his backyard, pondering about the mission he had been given not too long ago. This was the first difficult mission of a novice fighter. He had to knock out a virtual MMA fighter, and for this task was given about 30 attempts. The cost of this mission was 300 points, and as a reward, there was a skill upgrade. Cha Mu Yul crossed his palms and thoughtfully pondered over this whole situation. He thought about how this would be a great opportunity since the skills learned in the system were purely theoretical in nature and there was a huge difference in knowing theory and practice. The novice fighter decides that now is not the time to think about it, as he has to go to the tiger's lair. As it turned out, the high school student came to Jang Yonggil. They sat at the table and talked. The president remembered the words of his father, who told him that life is like a wave. But at that time, the man was too young and therefore did not understand what his father was trying to convey to him. Jang Young-gil poured water into a glass and smilingly said about how his father had gotten too old and so he didn't listen to him. The president added that he didn't have anyone who could shower him with a wave, but he was good at making a wave on others. The director saying that it would take wind to make a wave anyway. The CEO took his sharp sword in the palm of his hand and said with an acerbic smile on his face to the high school student about the windfall being the presence of someone like a father. After saying those words, with a sharp movement of his hand, the man slashed his palm. Chang Young-gil told the guy about how family didn't always mean that they had to share the same blood. He poured the blood that the man had gotten from the cut into a glass of water. And after that, Jang Young-gil said that he would become the wind for Cha Mu Yul that he had talked about earlier. The president asked the former outcast a question regarding how he felt about it. Cha Mu Yul replied that his father is still alive to this day. He doesn't think of anyone wanting to have two fathers at once. Cha Mu Yul placed a cup of water and clotted blood of the president at his side. He added that the father-son relationship is too precious and cannot be bought for a measly drop of blood. After that, the novice fighter said that for such an agreement, Jang Young-gil should at least break his neck. The high school senior said they should stop this conversation and get right to the point, since he came here because he was interested in signing a contract. The guy has already read the contract that Chang Young-gil sent him and knows all the clauses, namely, the money for the fight, the term of the contract, the renewal clause, the behavioral restrictions, the terms of the sponsorship merchandise, and all these rules seem to Cha Mu Yul as complete nonsense. With a smirk on his face, Cha Mu Yul asked the president a question regarding how badly the man was treating his fighters since he was offering them such a diabolical contract. After a while, the athletes had practice. One of them came up to the guys and told them about Cha Mu Yul coming back today. The guy on the right told them about seeing an article where a high school student signed Jang Young-gil without a training period. The deputy director of the RFS gym named Chai Won-ji overheard the guys talking about where they were talking about him and how if he hadn't been distracted, he could have won Cha Mu Yul. The guys went to the principal and asked him for a request that they all greet the high schooler properly. Then when he arrived, the guys wanted to enlighten the budding fighter as they thought of him becoming extremely arrogant. Cha Mu Yul walked into the gym and said hello loudly to all the guys, but no one answered him back. All the fighters just walked by and didn't react to the guy in any way. A small smirk appeared on the former outcast's face. Suddenly, the system window popped up again. It said that Cha Mu Yul should have as many knockouts as possible during the welcome match in the RFC hall. One knockout counted as 50 points, and if the fighter knocked out all of them, he would get about 1,000 points. The athlete looked at the sides and concluded that this place hadn't changed at all. Cha Mu Yul was confident that he would collect all the points. The principal clapped his hands and loudly told all the guys to start with warm-ups. All the fighters looked at the high school student with disdain. In their thoughts, Cha Mu Yul understood that he had no intentions of getting close to the others, but the former outcast realized that the guys probably hated him. After the fighters did jumping jacks, push-ups, and a three-pronged scramble workout, some of the guys sat down on the floor to rest for a while. The guy on the left was puzzled as to why this freak named Cha Mu Yul didn't look tired at all. The guys understood that when the opponent runs out of stamina, it is much easier to defeat him. RFS Gym Deputy Director Chai Won-ji shouted that the training was over, and then told all the fighters that there was a newcomer in their group and a welcome match, and all the guys agreed. A smile appeared on Cha Mu Yul's face as he had waited for this event for a long time. Chai Won-ji told the fighters that they will follow the rules of MMA, namely 1 round 2 minutes. He added that in this match, the gym members should take turns to fight the newcomer. After saying those words, contempt appeared in the deputy director's eyes. He thought about the fact that today's welcome match would be a little different from the previous ones. The deputy asked Young Soo if he had prepared gloves. The fighter said yes, but told Chai Won-ji that there were only 10 pairs. The fighters had a suspicious smile on their faces. The guy on the left said that they would finally be able to see how good the rookie was. His partner agreed with the words and added that he thought that Cha Mu Yul would be much different from the live broadcast. The guys were serious and wanted to show the high school students real strength. Chai Won-ji recalled their strategy. They agreed that the guys would start with a warm-up to expend Cha Mu Yul's energy and after that, would focus on keeping the fighter at close range. One of the guys said that you have to have a balance of attack and defense in close quarters. He added that Cha Mu Yul will have a hard time avoiding pressure and he will lose anyway. The young man talks about how this tactic is very good. But Cha Mu Yul understood the fact that all the fighters had analyzed his fight and figured out the reasons for his defeat. The vice principal continued to stare stubbornly at the guy. Chai Won-ji believed that the opponents of the new boxing star were ordinary people, not fighters, and on top of that, his luck played a big role as these athletes go through hard training every day. These fighters are on a whole different level than Cha Mu Yul's past opponents. After a while, Sang Hyok began to climb into the ring with slow steps, putting gloves on his hands. Pan Sang-hek entered the ring. He had a very suspicious smile on his face and his body looked quite strong. The fighter had an average RFC level and a ranking of 38, as well as a height of 187 centimeters and a weight of 90 kilograms. As soon as the professional from Team Chai Won Gi entered the ring, he immediately went on the attack. He tried to land many body blows on his opponent, but he failed because Cha Mu Yul was very good in defense. After that, Sang Hyok became more confident. He thought for the fact that his method was very effective and at this rate, he would be able to defeat his opponent in a short period of time. But his sweet fantasies were halted by Cha Mu Yul's punch. The high school student decided to take advantage of the moment while Sang Hyok was not really involved in the fight and hit him with a knee to the torso. It was too sharp and unexpected, so the opponent began to grunt in pain. When Sang Hyok's attention was focused on the intense and piercing pain, Cha Mu Yul decided to waste no time and make a grab. His opponent was completely bewildered at what he was doing. Cha Mu Yul completely piled the professional on the floor and blocked him from doing any attack. Sang Hyok began to swear as he didn't expect this high school student to be much stronger than he had imagined. The former outcast began to put pressure on his opponent's hand to stop him from swinging his arms and Cha Mu Yul could make a knockout. Sang-hek knew that his opponent would be good at martial arts, but he didn't expect that much. When the professional realized what was going on, he began to shout for the newcomer to stop, because he was giving up. All the fighters stood and watched this fight in amazement. The deputy director of the RFS gym stood with his arms crossed and silently watched the guys. Chai Won Gi raised one eyebrow and thought about the fact that Cha Mu Yul had defeated him thanks to the guillotine grapple and Pang Sang Hyok with a painful one. As suddenly, someone from behind the deputy's back said something that was expected. Chai Won Gi turned to the fighter as he didn't understand what was obvious to him, and after that, questioned the guy again. It was Jang Soo-hyuk. This young man had an average RFC level and ranked 30th and was 190 centimeters tall with a weight of 87 kilograms. The fighter entered the ring to Cha Mu Yul with a smile on his face. The opponent lowered his gaze down, and after that, with a suspicious face asked the high school student how he was doing. Cha Mu Yul found this guy very disgusting and unpleasant. A few seconds later, a system window popped up in front of the former outcast's face. The athlete was given an extra 100-point reward for the painful hold, which was great news for him. Jang Soo-hyuk prepared his fists to strike his opponent, and after that, with great speed and a caustic smile, he began to run at the high school student. Cha Mu Yul tilted his head down and looking through his forehead said that it was finally his time to hunt. But Jang Soo-hyuk immediately began to attack his opponent with a reverse elbow strike. This action was a huge surprise to the former outcast. The deputy shouted loudly to his fighter about aiming better and remembering to keep and control his distance. Cha Mu Yul angrily grabbed his opponent by the neck. The high school student had assumed from the beginning that things would not be as easy as he would have liked. He had not expected all the guys to be so over the top. Jang Soo-hyuk didn't plan to lose at all. He wasn't going to give up his momentum and somehow give the backlash. He swung his arm to strike at his opponent and end this once and for all. As suddenly, Jang Soo-hyuk's hand was stopped by a high school student. He abruptly grabbed and squeezed it so hard that his opponent quietly groaned in pain. The former outcast took his opponent by the torso and tried to throw him to the floor to end this fight. But Soo-hyuk was able to react in time and landed on the floor. He began to swear loudly as he couldn't believe that the high school student was able to stop his attack. The fighter looked at Cha Mu Yul with disdain as he non-stop stabbing at his torso. Cha Mu Yul took his opponent by the neck and leaned him against the corner. Jang Soo-hyuk put up a defense but it didn't help him at all and the guy kept hitting him. Jang Soo-hyuk called him a little fucker and added that he decided to play dirty. After a while, the opponent noticed that the high school student was attacking strangely as he couldn't anticipate his next move. The opponent added that in just a week, Cha Mu Yul had become a completely different fighter. After his thoughts, the professional swung his fist at Cha Mu Yul with a sharp movement of his hand in order to knock him out and take the fight into his own hands. But here was a setback. The opponent was easily able to dodge Jang Soo-hyuk's attack. The senior placed his foot on the top of his opponent's leg to produce a takedown. Jang Soo-hyuk couldn't believe that the little bastard was able to guide armbar into flight with ease. The opponent was confident that he wouldn't lose to the former outcast in this battle since if he fell, he would be screwed. The professional realized that he needed to get out as soon as possible. But suddenly, Cha Mu Yul converted the takedown into an omoplata, or in other words, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu painkiller. The fighter thought that he could break free from his opponent's arms and legs by force, but suddenly, he realized that during the entire match, he had not even taken a swing at Cha Mu Yul. While Chang Su-hek was thinking, then the opponent grabbed the fighter's neck with his legs and made another transition. Cha Mu Yul started to squeeze his opponent with his legs so hard that he started to choke. The former outcast said that it was Jang Su-hyuk's own fault as he started the fight with a sharp elbow strike to his side. A high school student with disdain and hatred in his eyes questioned the professional regarding whether he regretted what he had done. Jang Su-hek could not hold on. His eyes began to darken, and after the fighter realized that he could not do anything else, he shouted loudly that he had won and he surrendered. After these words, the novice athlete released his hold that he had previously made with his legs. Chang Su-hek's body lay on the floor and gave no signs of life. The fighter was trying to regain his breath and rest after such a strong attack. All the other athletes were in shock. They didn't expect this turn of events at all. Cha Mu Yul looked at all the fighters with a scary and creepy grimace, and after that he said that he already realized that the guys had decided to play with him seriously and without any jokes. The high school student approved this proposal and added that the fighters should not be afraid and come up to him in the ring. When the fighters noticed that the former outcast was really strong and the past live broadcast was not fake, their courage immediately disappeared. They stood silently and looked at different sides, and some guys even let their heads go down. Although no one said it out loud, but everyone in the audience believed that in the past week Mu Yul had become a completely different fighter, and the person who had already fought him understood this more than anyone else. The deputy director was speechless. He couldn't believe that this was really the same Cha Mu Yul who had fought him last time. Suddenly, another athlete appeared behind Chai Won-ji. He said with a serious face that it was his turn to fight. It was Bae Nam-hyun. He was of average weight and ranked 33. He was 186 centimeters tall and weighed about 79 kilograms. Chai Won-ji asked the fighter a question regarding whether he could beat Cha Mu Yul, and after adding that the higher-ranked guys have already flown away from him, Bae Nam-hyun replied that he will definitely not lose to anyone in boxing. His opponent furrowed his eyebrows, and after that, confidently said about his plans to provoke the high school student. Bae Nam-hyun got in the ring and immediately asked the guy a question regarding whether he likes to wave his arms around. Cha Mu Yul didn't answer anything to that and just stood there silently. After that, the pro got into a fighting stance. He told the former outcast with a smile on his face to come up with something much cooler, since, in boxing, he was no match for him at all. A smile appeared on the high school student's face. He said he had his doubts and suggested that the professional check it out in a duel. The professional thought that Cha Mu Yul naively fell for his provocation, and after that, swung his fist at the fighter saying that he was finished. As soon as Bae Nam-hyun was about to land a kick to his opponent's torso, he went into a stance called the shoulder roll. The vice principal talked about Cha Mu Yul getting into the shoulder roll, which is what they usually do when sparring with rookies. After that, he added that Nam-hyun is totally screwed. He continued to watch the fight between the two athletes, and a little while later said about how it was just a sparring session or even a simple break for a high school athlete. Bae Nam-hyun was very angry. He swung his fist at his opponent and shouted loudly for the bastard to get what he deserved. The pro's fist was not that far away from his opponent's face. Mu Yul thought about his opponent showing off too much. The budding fighter dodged a punch from Bae Nam-hyun, and after that, punched his opponent with a fist right in the face. Just from one such strong blow, the fighter lost consciousness and fell to the floor. All the other athletes were in complete shock. They could not believe that a novice fighter, with ease, was able to knock out 3 professionals. Cha Mu Yul took a deep inhale and exhale as he decided to catch his breath. He thought about the fact that in the next fight, he would be able to dance quite well like this. After another loss, Chai Won-ji yelled about Ho Jin doing whatever he wanted to the high schooler just so he could screw him over. The pro didn't understand and decided to ask again. The deputy aggressively yelled for Ho Jin to not think of this fight as sparring and just fight the former outcast. The fighter furrowed his eyebrows and afterward said he would do it properly and added for Chai Won-ji to rely on him. As soon as Ho Jin entered the ring, he immediately received a kick to the stomach from Cha Mu Yul. The attack wasn't weak at all as the pro twisted and his body was thrown backwards. The professional grunted with pain. He did not expect that the blows of the novice fighter would be so strong. The guy realized that it was too late to back up and it was necessary to fight to the end. After a while, Ho Jin decided to use a technique called oblique kick. He swung to hit Cha Mu Yul in the inner thigh. The high school student did not understand how his opponent could use such techniques while sparring. The fighter took a few steps back. In the end, Ho Jin managed to strike the inside of his opponent's thigh. He did it so quickly that Cha Mu Yul didn't have time to stop the attack. When the novice fighter was distracted, the professional struck again, but with his feet in the torso of the high school student. and after that, Ho-jin decided to hit Cha Mu Yul with his head directly in the face. He succeeded because the fighter again did not have time to dodge. The high school student fell to the floor and covered his nose with his palm. He said about this time, the bastard managed to headbutt him, thus breaking his nose. As suddenly, Cha Mu Yul exploded and did a torso grab on his opponent. Ho-jin was shocked as he didn't expect this turn of events. One of the fighters asked Chai Won-ji what they should do. The deputy said not to worry because Jin is good with the lower half of his body and from this position it would be impossible to attack him. Chai Won-ji added that the most important thing in this moment is for Ho-jin not to open his armpit. But the course of events had completely changed. Cha Mu Yul decided not to be petty and just make a throw. His opponent was waving his arms and it could be seen how scared he was. This strike was very epic. Cha Mu Yul was easily able to make the intended throw thereby stopping his opponent's attack. Suddenly, another fighter started running into the ring. He was cursing Cha Mu Yul and was very aggressive. The professional took the high school student by the collar of his shirt and questioned him about how he dared to use a technique called slam during sparring. He added that in the gym where Cha Mu Yul was practicing, he was probably not taught manners. The other fighters gathered around the two and watched the situation fearfully. Cha Mu Yul grabbed his opponent's hand and questioned him regarding why he was not allowed to use this technique. The high school student twisted the pro and started talking about the moves that Ho-jin did during their fight, namely oblique kick, elbow, poke to the eyes and stomp to the back of the head. After that, Cha Mu Yul said that all the guys in this gym, according to his observations, decided to just mess with him. The former outcast asked all the guys if it was customary for them to fight so ruthlessly. The enemy started screaming that he was hurt. All the fighters were very scared and did not understand what they should do. The senior's face became creepily terrifying. His eyes shrank, and from the intense anger on his father's face, he said that if the fighters all amicably wanted to kill him, then they should consciously be prepared for their deaths. The aspiring athlete said he initially knew that in their gym, only a few people were capable of fighting him. He added that he was pleased to remember the smell of anesthetic bandages again. A shadow fell frighteningly on the senior's head. He added that when he went to the gym, he hoped that the guys would help each other become stronger. But it was more likely that Cha Mu Yul expected too much from the fighters. Cha Mu Yul asked the fighters about why they keep standing and what they need in that octagon. And after that, the high school student added about the battle royal starting in their cultural program. All the athletes were overly angry and disgruntled. They didn't expect what a rookie was capable of. The high school student addressed the RFC gym's vice principal. As soon as Chai Won-ji heard his name from Cha Mu Yul's lips, he was immediately thrown into a shiver and his eyes shrank several times. The rookie furrowed his eyebrows and angrily told Chai Won-ji to get in the ring. He added that he would wipe the pro into a fine powder. When a fighter in the martial arts world says he has evaluated his partner, what he means is that he sees great potential in his opponent and sometimes just a brief glance is enough. Even if the fighter has not shown much, it can be based on how long he dominates the match. Some athletes are also said to be worthy of being a champion. Evaluation can be based on unimaginable physical performance and striking technique, such as that of Francis Ngannou, or by the extremely low match duration due to overwhelming wrestling skills. Such people include Khamzat Chimaev. The deputy director named Chai Won-ji also evaluated Cha Mu Yul in this area. A snotty kid who should have settled down somewhere on the national level was able to perform at his best on a real fighter show. But at that point, Cha Mu Yul's only strength was boxing. Chai Won-ji couldn't believe that this brat would be training at his gym. But there was a reason for this assessment. Because the high school student had only fought with beginners before. But there were real fighters waiting for him at the gym. The deputy realized that Cha Mu Yul would be immediately killed by his professionals as soon as he entered their gym. He added that it was not easy for any fighter to break out of his initial grade, but Mu Yul managed to do so. The former outcast's transitions between styles were originally ridiculous, but now, they were much better. Chai Won-ji couldn't realize that it could really be like this. He couldn't believe that a person could really change so drastically in just 1 year. Chai Won-ji started having a flood of negative thoughts. He was afraid that Cha Mu Yul would continue to win like this and would slaughter all the fighters, but he never got tired. Sweat began to pour from the deputy director's face and his body felt shaky. He said it would soon be his turn. As Chai Won-ji watched the rookie handle the professional with ease, the deputy wondered if he would be able to defeat and handle this monster once he stepped into the octagon. Suddenly, all the thoughts of the deputy interrupted the former outcast. He did not fight with all the fighters, and immediately decided to offer Chai Won-ji to fight with him. It was obvious that the guy was serious about the fight. After a while, Cha Mu Yul still didn't hear the answer. He furrowed his eyebrows and aggressively asked the deputy about why he was silent. He added that he saw the way Chai Won-ji had already prostrated himself. All the fighters turned around to look at their team leader, and standing in the middle was Cha Mu Yul himself, who was not in the mood at all. But suddenly, Chai Won-ji turned around and told all the guys in a serious tone of voice that the welcome match was already over. He added that their sparring today was already too long, and for that reason, the deputy was letting everyone go a little early. One of the fighters was perplexed and also very angry. He came up to Chai Won-ji and shouted that the guys cannot leave it like that, because they have to teach this brat good manners, because he forgot about what is respect. The guy asked Chai Won-ji a question about whether he should bring gloves for the fight with Cha Mu Yul. Chai Won-ji didn't understand what the jerk had just told him. The man couldn't believe that the fighter really wanted him to fight a high school student, or rather a monster. The deputy realized that he didn't want trouble on his own head and told the fighter that they had already welcomed the new member of their group well. Chai Won-ji added that if he fought him too, it would be too much. One of the guys agreed with the head's words. Chai Won-ji told the guys to close the issue and not to make the whole situation worse. He added that the fighters should pack up their belongings and go home. After a while, the deputy director came to Chang Yong-gil. He sat on his knees with his head to the floor and asked the president for an appointment to fight against Cha Mu Yul. The president listened to the fighter in silence. Chai Won-ji loudly yelling about how the cocky bastard had gotten to him and he wanted to teach him a bitter lesson. Jang Yong-gil said that he knew that the young man was overly upset by the welcome match. He added that the guys had already told him everything. Chai Won-ji fell silent. He was very angry that the president had found out about everything. From the beginning, Chai Won-ji's thoughts were simple to the point of outrage, but as time went on, he began to suspect what Cha Mu was afraid of, and the realization of the fear drove him crazy. The deputy couldn't deny it at all. The deputy director told Chang Yong-gil that after being humiliated so badly, he could no longer be a fighter and just had to fight. The president took the guy's hand and told him that he was really good. The president added that all the guys know that Chai Won-ji is a professional and the last fight with Cha Mu Yul really hurt his pride. Chai Won-ji looked very upset after the words of support from the president. Jang Yong-gil took the guy under his shoulder and told him with a suspicious smile that they had a very big event coming up. Jang Eun-gil started telling the fighter that Cha Mu Yul is extremely popular right now, and if Chai Won-ji can pile on the high schooler, all the glory will go to him. From these words, the deputy's face came to a crazed look. He just lived by power and popularity, so this course of events was to his liking. The deputy tilted his head down and said with a smile on his face about Mr. President not doubting him in any way and counting on Chai Won-ji. Jang Eun-gil put his hands on Chai Won-ji's shoulders and said in a calm voice that if that was all he had to say then he could be free to go. The president added that he would like to see anger in the ring and not in the office. There was only one president left in the office. He looked forward and after a while, there was a very loud slamming of the door. This meant that the fighter had left the building. After Chai Won-ji left, the man decided to sit back down at his desk, and after that, to continue doing the things he was distracted from by the professional fighter. After a while, Chang En-gil decided to break the sepulchral silence. He picked up a pitcher and slowly began to pour the white liquid into his glass. The sound spread throughout the office. The container was the same color as the liquid inside. The president said that a spectacle that would be more interesting than a fight between Cha Mu Yul and Chai Won-ji was something he had never seen before in his life. Behind Jang Yong-gil, the RFC's deputy director and also the chief secretary, Woo Hyun-chul did not mind at all and was in complete agreement with the president's words. After the man drank the contents in the glass, he with a smirk on his face, told Woo Hyun-chul about scheduling a fight right before the main event. The head secretary accepted his boss's assignment without resentment. Jang En-gil turned his head and looked out the window. It was late at night and the bright moon was illuminating the tall and thick trees. The president said in a quiet voice that after a long time, Chai Won-ji, or rather his son, would do what he should do. Some time passed. The journalists and other representatives were in a small office, each of these people doing their own work. Han Ji-ju saw a document that said that Chai Won-ji would be fighting Cha Mu Yul. After reading that, he asked his partner if she thought the match was strange. Kang Hai-min did not show any emotion. She only said in a calm voice that there was an unspoken rule that fighters from the same gym would not compete against each other. The girl added that most of the time it is like that, but many times there were times when fighters throw mud at their old comrades. The journalist said for the fact that the martial arts industry is ruled by money and its amount. Kang Hai-min was well aware of the fact that fighters are ready for anything if you call them to you, ringing in gold coin. The reporter put her hand on her cheek and looking away said that it was about Chai Won-ji. She added that if Han Ji-ju hadn't forgotten, the former outcast had just recently humiliated a professional in front of a large audience. Han Ji-ju looked at the document again. He said that the match promises to be very interesting. The partner didn't hesitate to agree with his words. Kang Hai-min told her partner that there was a very interesting gossip among Asian martial arts fans. Han Ji-ju turned to his partner. His eyes were in anticipation of something unusual. He asked a question with surprise in his voice regarding what happened there. Kang Hai-min was silent and then called Real Fighter Team. She leaned back and after that, put her hands behind her back and with a sincere smile on her face said about how it was just a production or something like that. On the reporter's screen was the processing of some attachment. As it turned out it was a video called Shenanigans in Asian Martial Arts. Kang Hai-min turned to Han Ji-ju and said with a snide smile on her face that despite the whole situation, she was going to add fuel to the fire. The young man didn't understand what Kang Hai-min was trying to tell him, but he could only wait for something interesting to happen soon. The stranger sat at his desk and stared silently into the computer screen. It was Ariel Watson. He was the proprietor of a North American martial arts magazine called Fighting Dog, and he was also the main host of a martial arts radio podcast. Ariel also had an unusual nickname, namely the Grey Cardinal of the martial arts world. The man found a video that was uploaded to the social network by a journalist named Kang Hai-min. In the comments Ariel saw that fans would like to see something new brought to the industry of the sport. Watson was surprised at this turn of events. He couldn't imagine that Asia was still hosting such a circus. The presenter went to the comments to read people's opinions and emotions from this video. As it turned out, fans were not happy at all with what they saw. They thought that this fight was a usual staging, because newcomers are not able to fight as skillfully as Cha Mu Yul. Ariel could not understand at all what people are talking about. A smile appeared on the man's face as he said a fight between rookies is always fun. Watson added that he loves watching jerks clean each other's faces. With a slight movement of his hand, Ariel clicked the mouse and said that he needed to watch this ridiculous video anyway. But what was the presenter's surprise when he started watching this fight? Watson liked the way Cha Mu Yul moved, as well as how skillfully the athlete boxed. Ariel's face changed dramatically. The man was surprised at how professionally the newcomer moved. The main anchor watched the moment Cha Mu Yul hit Chai Won-ji straight in the leg. Ariel couldn't believe his eyes. Then came the moment when the former outcast launched an attack into his opponent's ribs, thus breaking the fighter's two ribs. Watson called Cha Mu Yul a true monster. Ariel Watson's emotions completely changed. His eyes shrank and his face had a crazy grin up to his ears. He shouted loudly that he had found a real nugget. Sometime later, the protagonists found themselves in one of the fast food establishments. When Yoon-min asked the former outcast if he liked spending time with her, Cha Mu Yul replied that he didn't really have any special feelings for the girl. After saying that, Yoon-min was puzzled because all the girls were ready to line up just to go on a date with Cha Mu Yul. The athlete frowned his eyebrows with aggression in his voice and said that he would never believe it. The girl got on her phone and talked about people constantly using her videos without any permission. Cha Mu Yul was interested in this news. He asked a question regarding who exactly is taking her video. The streamer replied that these are subscribers who came to her after the Cha Mu Yul video. She added that she is sure that the guys are taking advantage of these snippets in a big way. Leafing through her phone with her finger, Yoon-min decided to see exactly who was using and taking links to her video. When the streamer came across Ariel Watson, she was surprised to see the channel and how many viewers it had. Yoon-min thought that this man was a foreign streamer. Yoon-min read the description of the channel. It talked about the Fighting Dog magazine. When the former outcast heard that, he was plunged into shock. The girl thought the stranger was a weirdo, but Cha Mu Yul grabbed the brush and surprisingly told her friend to stop. Ariel Watson had about 3 million subscribers on his channel. The athlete immediately recognized this stranger and who he was talking about. Cha Mu Yul couldn't even understand how things had gotten that way and why Ariel had watched and mentioned the video of him. The former outcast asked her friend about opening a chat broadcast. Nina replied in a calm voice that she was doing that for the moment. After a few seconds, Yoon-min told the fighter that Ariel Watson wanted to interview him. Mu Yul thought it was a great opportunity. As if he was recognized on the international scene, it would be a great opportunity for him to become even more famous. A few days later, the fighters gathered for another training session at the gym. The guys asked each other if they had heard the news that Cha Mu Yul would be interviewed. The guys agreed and added that unifying the belts was total bullshit. The guy on the left said that no matter how it is, he's still jealous of Cha Mu Yul, because in addition to Ariel Watson, the newcomer met with the RFC executive director. The fighter below replied that he doesn't see what there is to be jealous of, because the former fat guy is going to get beaten up by one GI any day now. The three boys turned back sharply, for they heard a shout. Someone was loudly and aggressively reprimanding one of the fighters. It was Chai Won Gi who vented his anger on Mu Yul, the deputy yelling that there would be no interview because the fighter belongs to RFC and Mr. President did not give any permission. Cha Mu Yul replied with a nonchalant face that there were no interview restrictions in his contract. The deputy director shouted loudly for the fighter not to talk bullshit because, in a normal contract, no sooner had Chai Won Gi proved his point than, suddenly, he was interrupted by the former outcast. He said that the professional never realized the fact that their contract was not on the same terms and Mu Yul's was completely different. Chai Won Gi was overwhelmed with anger. He was ready to kill the rookie right here and now. The pro's fist began to shake with aggression. He said that he is a deputy director and will not let this matter go down. Won Gi added that a fighter should not only know how to fight but also become the best version of himself, and to just go and give out interviews to anyone is disrespectful to his comrades. These words didn't hurt Cha Mu Yul. He only laughed lightly and thought to himself that Chai Won Gi was really crazy. The rookie didn't expect anything else from a professional. He still remembered that moment when Chai Won Gi had taunted Mu Yul as he lay on the floor barely alive. The deputy jabbed his finger at the fighter and spoke in an aggressive voice about having to penalize the athlete. Cha Mu Yul asked a question regarding whether or not he would train on his own. The former outcast was not going to back up at all. He was trying to pressure Chai Won Gi in every way possible. Chai Won Gi stammered and began to say that he was temporarily excluding Cha Mu Yul from his gym. He added that the fighter would be on probation, and on top of that, the former outcast also can't use the machines in the gym. The newcomer smiled and said the deputy was as simple as the deputy director's 3 pennies. The pro didn't understand what he was talking about and asked again. Mu Yul replied that he had made him a probationary period right before the match and Chai Won Gi's intentions. Even a kindergartner would understand. When the former outcast asked the deputy if he was afraid of him, Chai Won Gi here even got angry and started to look very aggressive. He angrily grabbed Cha Mu Yul by his sweater and shouted about being a bastard. But the newcomer didn't feel any sense of fear or fright at all. He only watched in amazement at what was happening. In the end, the newcomer agreed to do as Won Gi wants. He added that because of the match that will happen very soon, it would be better for them to stop crossing paths with each other in the same gym. After saying those words, Cha Mu Yul grabbed his opponent's hand with a dead grip. And eventually, the newcomer moved her away from herself and her sweatshirt. The deputy director was surprised by this action. But Mu Yul was not going to let go of his hand and silently leave the hall. He began to squeeze Chai Won Gi's hand harder and harder. It was evident the way the newcomer was aggressive against the deputy. Won Gi shouted loudly and called Cha Mu Yul a brat. The former outcast turned around, waved his hand away and said they would see each other in the ring. All the fighters looked at him and were silent. At last, Cha Mu Yul turned around and called the professional a point man without emotion. Chai Won Gi was overflowing with anger. He clenched his teeth and furrowed his brows. And after that, he called the newcomer a real asshole. The doors opened abruptly and the newcomer still walked out of that room. With the former outcast completely gone, the pro decided to take a look at his hand that his opponent was clutching. There were red finger marks left on his hand from the strong compression from Cha Mu Yul. This meant that the approaching fight was going to be very interesting. After leaving the gym, the newcomer was walking down the sidewalk and thinking about the whole situation. He understood the fact that if he stayed as a fat man, after treating a professional like that, he would get into huge trouble. But now Cha Mu Yul had changed and he deeply didn't care about the words and actions of his opponents. A system window appeared in front of the former outcast's eyes, stating that Cha Mu Yul had gotten a total of over 500 points and now had a protocol called Liberated. This was something new and interesting to the guy. At this point, the reporter was interviewed and talked about how absolutely everyone expects Chai Won Jin to win in the upcoming and attractive events, but nevertheless, both fighters will definitely prepare a strategy that will be the key to their victory. Recently, everyone is just talking about Cha Mu Yul being kicked out of the gym. Journalist Kong Haiman asked a professional to comment on the situation. Chai Won-gi replied that when two fighters from the same gym are preparing to fight each other, the most obvious thing to do would be for one of them to train somewhere else. Kong Haiman listened, and after that, she asked another question regarding whether the one knew where the former outcast would train after leaving the gym. The deputy director became angry after that question. He yelled about how he didn't know and added that his opponent just wasn't worth the effort. The professional said that mixed martial arts has always been a sport for him and he was most interested in the matches. But this time, the match turned into a brawl and a one-sided fight. Won-gi added that last time, he was not at his best, as he was very insecure. The deputy director promised everyone that this will not happen again in the ring. Chai Won-gi frowned his eyebrows and said with a serious tone in his voice that he simply couldn't lose to a newcomer. After the interview was over, the journalist posted it on social media for all to know the motives and goals of the deputy director. When Han Ji-ju saw that video, he was shocked as the views were gaining more and more. Kang Haimin said with a smile on her face that the interview with Cha Mu Yul went viral because of Ariel Watson. The partner agreed with the girl's words but added that the video came out very touching. Han Ji-ju recalled Cha Mu Yul's speech when he talked about representing weak people in an interview. After saying that, the reporter even wanted to pay to watch the fight himself. The journalist was sure that these words had touched a large number of people and now all the attention belonged to Cha Mu Yul. The girl was happy with the whole situation as PPV profits will go up not only in Asia but now in North America as well. After Han Ji-ju wondered what Cha Mu Yul was doing at the moment, she said that she couldn't say for sure because she didn't know what she was doing. Kang Haimin was sure that whatever the newcomer was doing right now, he was preparing hard for the upcoming battle. But as it turned out, Cha Mu Yul had put on a mask over his eyes from excess light and was sleeping peacefully leaning on his desk. The classmates were shocked because they knew that the fighter was scheduled for a match and he is just lying down and resting. The guy on the left said that Mu Yul will probably sleep and go to the gym. The girl asked him if he saw the interview, and then said that the former outcast was kicked out of the gym. As suddenly, Cha Mu Yul abruptly jerked up and started coughing. All the classmates were startled and leaned back, and there was intense surprise on their faces. After coughing, the newcomer calmly lay back down and continued sleeping. The girl said with consternation in her voice that she had already thought that Cha Mu Yul had had a seizure. The classmates had an assumption that Cha Mu Yul had a dream of training where he stands with a log on his shoulders and squats. The coach was yelling at him about doing things faster and harder, as well as lifting more aggressively, or he'd still be a brat. The former outcast thought the boss was a complete lunatic, as this is the 20th repetition in the 10th approach. The man bent down to the newcomer and asked aggressively what he should do with him, as they had just started the class and Cha Mu Yul was barely alive. The trainer added that he was not a fighter at all. The coach was yelling about the fighter's spirit being too weak. He was talking about Cha Mu Yul challenging himself and surpassing himself. And for that, he needs to shut up and move me on. It was a virtual space named Match Preparation Protocol. The man aggressively said that it would all depend on Cha Mu Yul whether he was an angel or a demon. From the outside, it looks like Cha Mu Yul is just sleeping, but in fact, he's practicing in the virtual space. Why you need a protocol? It is clear from the name. It helps fighters to prepare for the match, as well as begins to appear 6 weeks before the fight, but at the same time not always. The preparation protocol for the match is divided into 2 categories, namely sparring to be done 10 times in physical training. Cha Mu Yul chose the second distribution. In the virtual world, time goes 5 times slower. When the rookie returned home, he complained to himself that his whole body aches and pains. Cha Mu Yul hoped that he wouldn't fall apart after such training at the actual match with Chai Won-gi. Training in the virtual world also affects the physical body. This news made the former outcast very happy. Cha Mu Yul understood how strong his body was, but the recovery was unimaginably fast. The bones, the muscles, the strength of the muscles, the speed of their growth, all of it was even a bit frightening to a beginner. When the former outcast bent his head down, he saw the shadow of a man unknown to him in front of him. It was a former member of Han Dae-gun's team named Choi Suk-tu. He was surprised to meet the guys and immediately asked him how he was doing. Choi Suk-tu emphasized that Cha Mu Yul's face was as smug as ever. The fighter stood silently listening to the guy's negative remarks. The fat man came closer to Cha Mu Yul and asked him a question about whether his parents had explained to the fighter about answering when he was asked a question. Cha Mu Yul pretended that he didn't know Choi Suk-tu and had never crossed paths with him. Suk-tu was furious at this behavior. He called the guy a bastard, and after that, he asked a question regarding the way the guy was talking to him. But suddenly, Choi Suk-2 exhaled and said in a calm voice that they shouldn't waste each other's time since they are fighters and since they met, they should fight. The former outcast was a little surprised at these words. The fat man started to say that he was no longer interested in street fighting because he was no longer a gangster. Choi Suk-2 said that there was a gym in Apgujeong where he usually trained, and after that, suggested Cha Mu Yul to go there if he wasn't afraid. Cha Mu Yul gave his consent with a smirk on his face as he didn't mind going to that hall with Choi Suk-2. Choi Suk-2 poked his finger at his opponent and aggressively talked about the fighter paying him in full tomorrow for their past fight. As the fat man left, Mu Yul realized what a great opportunity this was, because he got a free live pair. The former outcast smiled and said he would never miss a chance and would gladly take it. The next day when Cha Mu Yul was coming back from school, he met up with Choi Suk-2, who as promised took the rookie to where he trains every day. There were other fighters standing outside and silently watching what was happening. The guy in the green sweatshirt yelled out the former outcast's name and motioned for him to come a little closer. It was Suk-Jin Man. He was ranked number 8 RFC, as well as was part of the light heavyweight group. This fighter was 193 centimeters tall and weighed about 94 kilograms. Cha Mu Yul didn't expect the athlete to be so tall and massive. Suk-Jin Man said that he knew that the newcomer and his comrade had an unresolved issue. He added that since the guys are fighters, they should solve all the issues in the octagon. The former outcast didn't argue and easily agreed with Jin Man's words. They shook hands. Suk-Jin Man smiled even wider, and after that, called the newcomer a real man. The professional put his hand on Cha Mu Yul's shoulder and told the guy to relax a little, after which Suk-Jin Man added that he should start with warming up, because it would be cruel if the newcomer would be attacked by other fighters. Jing Man said with a smile on his face that the former outcast could use their inventory as much as his soul desired. But first, Cha Mu Yul should stretch himself well. The former outcast looked at the professional with disdain and fell silent, and after a couple seconds he agreed with his words. The fighters entered the octagon. Suk-Jin Man said this fight will be full contact, no helmets, no shin guards, just like a real fight. Afterward, he asked the athletes if they had any objections. Cha Mu Yul and Choi Suk-2 loudly shouted that they had nothing against such rules. Choi Suk-2 immediately got into a fighting stance and was ready before striking his opponent. Cha Mu Yul looked at the guy and realized that he had become more like a real fighter, because it had been a long time since that show and it was obvious that Choi Suk-tae was going to change a lot. The professional looked at his opponent with contempt in his eyes, and after that, called him by name and said that he wasn't the same as he used to be. The former outcast did not oppose his words in any way. He only shouted for Choi Suk-2 not to procrastinate and attack first. Choi Suk-2 took a swing and swung his right hand at his opponent's shoulder, but Cha Mu Yul was not a bad guy either and easily managed to dodge the incoming attack. But to be honest, the newcomer didn't expect anything else from his opponent. He was sure that Suk-2 would hit him with his right arm in the shoulder. Cha Mu Yul realized that he could knock out a professional with just one cross punch, but he didn't want to do it because he thought it would be boring and not interesting at all. No matter how this match ends, the former outcast plans to utilize his body's capabilities to the fullest. Choi Suk-2 made a sharp swing of his hand and shouted loudly that he would kill his opponent. The professional's face just brimming with anger and hatred towards the newcomer. But the blow was not realized. The former outcast ducked down to Choi Suk-2's body and wrapped a dead grip around his torso so that he could not get out of the grip. The professional didn't expect this turn of events at all. From the fact that his plan to win completely went down the drain, he clenched his teeth with anger and started swearing loudly. Suk-2 didn't understand why the fuck he couldn't budge. Cha Mu Yul lowered his eyes down and with hatred in his voice, called his opponent a real pig, and then added that if he was in his old form, he would have lost to Choi Suk-2 long ago. What the former outcast realized was that if the professional really wasn't amenable to him in battle, then his body had become many times more powerful and stronger than it had been before. The newcomer grabbed Suk-2 by the neck and delivered an E-strike, aiming straight for his opponent's stomach. It was so sharp and powerful that he cried out in great pain. After the blow, saliva began to fly out of the professional's mouth, and a violent shudder could be heard in his voice. After a while, the fighter began to grunt and cough. Without allowing his opponent to take a break and move away from the previous strike, Cha Mu Yul immediately swung to attack the fighter again. All of his actions, the rookie did with a nonchalant and pessimistic face. Suk-Jin Man was smiling as he watched this whole situation. He was surprised that the newcomer had done the flickering jab. In simple words, it was a fast and whip-like straight punch. It always seemed to the professional fighter that Suk-2 is developing at a breakneck pace, but he came to the conclusion that Cha Mu Yul, he is no match for him. Despite Cha Mu Yul being slightly younger than his opponent, he was still 3 heads taller than him. Blood started flying out of Choi Suk-too's mouth and hatred was in his eyes. He started swearing loudly, and after a couple seconds, he yelled for the newcomer to start fighting him instead of standing in the same place. The fat man began to gain speed to attack his opponent. He shouted with anger in his voice that Cha Mu Yul had already fucked everyone up because he was crawling around like a dead mouse in this octagon. After hearing those words, the former outcast stood a bit in a stupor. He couldn't believe that such a squishy opponent like Choi Suk-too would attack him now and be able to knock him out. The rookie didn't think long and wrapped his arms around his opponent's neck and began to squeeze it harder and harder. The professional didn't expect such a turn of events, especially that he would fall into Cha Mu Yul's grasp so quickly. In order to prevent the opponent from getting out of the grip, the former outcast decided to take Choi Suk-too's back, and after that, with all his might, he began to press down on his body. Suk-jingman was extremely surprised that Cha Mu Yul had managed to take his opponent's back. It was so unpredictable for him that his mouth opened and his eyes shrank several times. Cha Mu Yul wasn't going to give up at all, and he didn't even have a single thought of losing. He held on to the neck of the professional and tried his best to end this round with a win. His face was like a shadow, but his eyes were shining and eager to win. The young man in the green sweatshirt was shocked again, but he was shocked to see that the newcomer had performed a chokehold on his opponent from behind without any difficulty or hardship. The former outcast firmly grasped Choi Suk-too's neck and extremely quickly began to work and put all of the previously contrived attacks into an actual fight. Jin Man's emotions completely disappeared from his face. The professional understood perfectly well that Choi Suk-too had not the slightest chance of winning, and to make his own life easier, it would be best for him to surrender right now. All the other fighters stood with their mouths open, as they had not expected such a turn of events from the newcomer. Cha Mu Yul decided to take pity on his opponent and let go of his grip no matter what. Choi Suk-too was greatly surprised by such an action. Suk-jingman was shocked by the fighter's action. He asked Cha Mu Yul a question in a surprised voice regarding what he was doing. The former outcast said that Jin Min himself told him that men should settle matters in the ring, which is why the fighter is giving Choi Suk-too a chance to talk about the conflict that has been created between them. The newcomer, smiling caustically, told the professional to try his best, for the latter looked like a common and pathetic gangster. These words made Choi Suk-too very angry. He swung his fat fist at the newcomer and shouted with anger in his voice, calling him a complete bastard. But absolutely any blow from the opponent ended in failure. Cha Mu Yul easily bypassed and dodged any attack of the professional while he just waved his arms in different directions in the hope of somehow touching the rookie. Suk-jingman was not happy with Choi Suk-too's tactics. He began to shout at the fighter that he should not swing his arms, because even if he hits, this blow will not give him anything. The situation was overly tense, with the fighters standing in a fighting stance facing each other and preparing to attack. Soon Cha Mu Yul decided not to make trouble for himself and take pity on his opponent. He turned his back to Choi Suk-too and took a deep exhale. The professional had not expected this turn of events at all and stood in shock. The fat man's nose was still bleeding. He was not at all happy with this turn of events and was very annoyed by the former outcast's behavior. The commander-in-chief in this room was just as shocked. He didn't understand what this kid was trying to accomplish in this octagon. Choi Suk-too called his opponent with hatred and anger the very real creature. The former outcast turned around sharply, his pupils shrinking from what he saw and his mouth open in surprise. The fatty in the rat decided to punch the newcomer in the jaw. Due to the fact that it was very unpredictable for Cha Mu Yul, the latter did not have time to put up a defense and ended up taking the blow. After that punch, Suk-jingman ran into the octagon and fearfully asked a question regarding what the pro was allowing himself to do. And afterward, the commander-in-chief added that Choi Suk-too had completely lost his mind. The former outcast didn't react in any way to the blow he delivered. He looked at his opponent with disdain. It was evident how he wished for the fat man's death in every way possible after he punched him in the rat from behind. Chin Man was very excited. He took Cha Mu Yul by the shoulder and showed him one finger in front of him. After a while, he asked the rookie how many fingers he could see, and after that, asked the guy another question regarding whether he was alright. The former outcast replied that he was fine and there was nothing to worry about. The commander-in-chief began to apologize on his behalf, and after that, he added that Cha Mu Yul had an important match very soon and so, for today, this ridiculous fight would be over. But not here. The former outcast said that this is not the way to do it and it is very unacceptable for a fighter. Suk-jingman was surprised. He didn't get the point and re-interrogated the fighter again, blowing his eyes wide. The rookie remembered the words of his coach who told him that all issues should be resolved in the ring. The former outcast added that he now has a few questions before Choi Suk-tu, and afterward, he turned to the professional and asked him what he thought about the situation. Choi Suk-tu was sure that the opponent felt from head to toe his blow, but the rookie dodged all the blows and then when the fat man still hit him, this attack did not do anything at all. The professional did not understand what to do in this situation. The fat man looked very scared. He turned to the commander-in-chief and stammered and said that they had probably had enough training for today. Suk-jin-man put his hand on the guy's shoulder and said with fear in his eyes that the fatty had started it all and therefore, he should end it. The pro started yelling for his bro not to leave and leave him alone with this problem, but Chin-man was already approaching the entrance to the octagon. He waved his hand away and told the fat man to show everyone that he is indeed a real man and his words are not empty. Choi Suk-tu was alone with his main problem at the moment. He didn't understand what he should do in this situation and how best to proceed. The fat man realized that he was in for a complete fuck-up. He was swearing loudly and his face was twisted with intense fear and excitement. After the martial arts professional weighed the pros and cons, he realized something that he could definitely withstand one more strike, but if it was just one attack and no more. While Choi Suk-tu was thinking and framing a possible ending to this match, the former outcast swung his fist and hit his opponent straight in the stomach. It was very sharp and not at all predictable. Immediately after the first blow, the second one came, but now in the jaw. Cha Mu Yul did not feel sorry for his opponent. He struck his blows clearly and powerfully, not sparing the fat man in any way. Suk-jin-man was shocked, his eyes shrank, and the intense surprise that the commander-in-chief felt was hard to describe even with simple words. He couldn't believe that Cha Mu Yul was able to produce such a strong sound while striking, using the 18-ounce gloves. Yet, the rookie didn't experience any difficulty while striking. Cha Mu Yul grabbed his opponent by the neck and with a serious face told him in his ear to hold on a little longer because it would be a shame for him if Choi Suk-tu just passed out like that. The former outcast was not going to stop at all. He continued to strike his opponent's torso more and more often, and in time, even his legs were used. The fighter recalled what Suk-jin-man had told him, namely that all issues or conflicts he should resolve in the octagon. So the rookie once again prepared his fist to deliver another blow to his opponent. But suddenly, his fist was stopped by the commander-in-chief. He calmly said for Cha Mu Yul to stop and stop this fight right now. Suk-jin-man holding the former outcast's hand said that he had already seen enough of the fight and that was enough for him. Behind him was Choi Suk-tu. The guy curled up and lay quietly without making a sound. In his defense, the rookie decided not to say anything. He only silently looked at Jin-man and his opponent, and his eyes were completely indifferent to the whole situation. After a while, Cha Mu Yul just turned around and headed for the exit of the octagon. The fighter did not utter a word to the guys, he just silently walked away. After Cha Mu Yul's bout against Choi Suk-tu came to an end, the guys in the audience decided to go to Chai Won-ji's office and talk about what they had today. The fighter on the left told the deputy director that the newcomer smeared the fat guy on the wall. After a while, another guy joined the conversation. He added that Choi Suk-tu is not as fat as he was before. But despite this, the former outcast still managed to shatter the dude who was tens of kilograms heavier than him. Chai Won-ji tried to change the athletes' minds. He started talking about the fact that the fighter had a potbelly, and it still remains. Chai Won-ji couldn't believe that Cha Mu Yul had become stronger again. He remembered the image of the rookie in the welcome match and realized the fact that he was completely different. The deputy director opened the video of the fight. He was angry at the newcomer because he had kicked him out so that he could not train, but the former outcast still managed to pump his muscles even stronger somewhere. Chai Won-ji began to think that Cha Mu Yul was on some kind of substances because he did not understand how he could develop and learn something new so quickly. The pro frowned his eyebrows. He had set a goal for himself, which concerned defeating Cha Mu Yul at any cost. Won-ji asked Seo Hyun a question regarding what he thought about the video. The guy replied that Choi Suk-tu had pissed off a rookie and got punked for it. Then the vice principal said he meant the second round. The screen included a tab with an attachment where the guys are competing against each other. Chai Won-ji said they would crop the video itself and remove the first part, and after that, anonymously upload it to the internet. Seo Hyun had a wry smile on his face as he said that the vice principal had a great idea and this suggestion was delicious. When this video was uploaded to the network, then in the comments fans began to show their dissatisfaction. They wrote that Cha Mu Yul is very aggressively beating his opponent and it is no longer a sparring, but a real fight, in which the newcomer, too much overkill. In 3 hours, this video has gotten about 100,000 views and about 4,000 likes. Chai Won-ji was sitting in the gym with his phone in his hands. He told Cha Mu Yul to chew on all the shit that had been dropped on him, and after that he added that even if the rookie was strong, he was still the same stupid schoolboy. Fans were saying that the newcomer was too selfish and he should have followed all the rules in the ring, even though the opponent Cha Mu Yul is a former gangster. The deputy director was delighted with this asset. He was well aware of the fact that at this rate will be able to direct public opinion in the right direction. The fighter was looking at his phone with a smirk on his face. He knew that the audience would bring him victory and Cha Mu Yul would be forgotten like a bad dream. Suddenly, Chai Won-ji's phone received a message from one of his acquaintances, who wrote that they had a very big problem. The head did not understand what happened and surprised himself. When Chai Won-ji went to the chat room itself to fully read the incoming message, he saw a link to a video saying that Cha Mu Yul had uploaded the video to the social network. The deputy director was very surprised. He decided to follow the link and look at the video itself, as he didn't understand what it was all about. This was the 10th video, which was titled as Cha Mu Yul vs. Pig with Tattoos, full version, and on the cover of the attachment itself, it showed Choi Suk-tu taking a punch to the jaw of his opponent. A few hours earlier, the former outcast also saw that video of him beating up his opponent. The fighter did not understand what he should do because the original video was in the possession of those assholes. But one thing Cha Mu Yul knew for sure was that he had no way to justify himself to the fans. Because the rookie didn't find the best option, he decided to let it go. The fighter added that if things started to get worse, he would just punch everyone in the face. Suddenly, he came across another martial arts video, and was surprised to see him and his rival Choi Suk-tu on the cover. After seeing that, Cha Mu Yul started to remember all the events that happened to him a few days earlier. He remembered how Suk-jin-man apologized to him for the way his fight ended, and after that, the commander-in-chief added that the rookie showed his skills very well. The latter thanked him and said that he was also to blame for the situation. Suk-jin-man waved his hand and told the former outcast not to take the blame since Choi Suk-tu was the first to start the conflict, and after that, the head again asked for an apology on behalf of the team and wished Cha Mu Yul good luck with his preparation. The latter briefly and dryly thanked Jin-man for giving him support. After their conversation, the head folded his hands in his pockets and walked straight ahead. He didn't even turn around or look in the direction of the former outcast, but only silently walked away. While Cha Mu Yul was watching the departing silhouette of the head, someone approached him. The fighter did not expect such a turn of events, so this action frightened him a little. They were two little school children. The boy on the right happily said about how they saw the former outcast's last fight and how he fought today. The kid added that Cha Mu Yul is very cool in martial arts, but the fighter was not very happy. He silently began to walk forward, and then said that the boys are too young for such an adult sport and instead, they should read children's comics. As suddenly, one of the boys asked Cha Mu Yul a question regarding whether he is an MMA fighter. The rookie replied that a little more he will have the title. Then the kid in a yellow jacket asked the athlete to give him an autograph. After saying that, Cha Mu Yul was a little hesitant. He tilted his head down and began to weigh the pros and cons of this proposal. He put his hands on their shoulders and said that he would give them an autograph only on one condition: if the children did not become like that bandit. The faces of the kids were just overflowing with joy. They shouted loudly that they would not be like that bully and would obey the fighter. It was obvious that they were really crazy about Cha Mu Yul, and any of his indulgence brought happiness to the school children. It finally came to Cha Mu Yul's attention that those high school students he met on his way home were not only watching his fight, but also videotaping the whole thing. The former outcast smiled sincerely. It was obvious that he felt much better about the whole situation, which had just cleared up. In time, the fighter realized that the autograph, which he gave to the guys, very well paid for itself. It was the day of the long-awaited competition. The guys decided to interview Cha Mu Yul and Choi Won-ji before the fighters enter the octagon. There were journalists, reporters, deputies and many other representatives sitting in the audience. The newcomer knew that he would make everyone happy with his news. On the left side sat Cha Mu Yul. It was not obvious that he was afraid or scared. The fighter was completely calm and confident. On the right side was Chai Won-ji. He did not look at the camera, but just read the documents that were on his desk. Usually in this room there are only Asian reporters, but today the audience of athletes was much more diverse. Kang Haimin crossed her arms and said that all these people are here because of Ariel Watson and also because of Choi Suk-tu's video. Her partner agreed and added that every dog has seen at least a piece of that fight, and maybe this is the beginning of Star Fighter. A journalist named John Shelby started talking in English about how he was very surprised by the recent video, and then asked Cha Mu Yul a question about how he felt about the fact that only a cropped version of the fight had been released on the resources from the beginning. The translator took the microphone to translate what John Shelby said from English, but the former pariah left the girl alone and said she didn't need to do that. Cha Mu Yul started to speak completely in English. He said that he didn't see anything wrong with that situation, for someone just wanted to shake his reputation. After that, the fighter said that he could openly talk about the fact that the hater failed to do so. The translator sat in complete shock at how the guy speaks a foreign language cleanly and quickly. John Shelby said that he heard from other people that Cha Mu Yul gave a fan his autographed notebook, and if you analyze this act, the fighter loves and appreciates his fans very much. He replied that it was the first time he was asked for a signature and that's why he was not ready at all. The guy added, "It was an English notebook." The journalists were shocked by the foreign language skills of the former outcast. The English-speaking journalist said that it would be hard to argue in this situation, and afterward added that less from Watson should not have been expected, as the man had a trained eye from the start. After a few minutes, Chai Won-ji came to a wild rage. He clenched his teeth and looked disdainfully at his opponent, who was sitting not so far away from him. In his thoughts, Chai Won-ji called the former outcast a total brat and added that even if he knew English, he didn't see the point in being so fucked up. The deputy director took his eyes to the side and thought about the fact that a real fighter should be cleaning faces and not thrashing his tongue. He added that he would destroy Cha Mu Yul into ashes, and after Chai Won-ji did that, then all the popularity would go to him. All the people in the audience raised their hands and started shouting that they had questions before Cha Mu Yul. Any reporter who was sitting in that room was loudly shouting the name of the aspiring fighter. This kind of behavior and attitude of people did not please Chai Won-ji at all. He was extremely angry from this whole situation. Chai Won-ji couldn't stand it and took the microphone in his hands. He shouted loudly and aggressively that Cha Mu Yul had made everyone's head spin so hard with that pathetic video of Choi Suk Thursday that everyone was dumbfounded by this aspiring fighter. In addition, he called his opponent a petty bastard who had achieved nothing in life. The vice director angrily said that all the reporters want to know about Cha Mu Yul's English level, how he was bullied or how he participated in Real Fighter. Chai Won-ji added that they all want to know a lot more about the newcomer, but he doesn't hear any questions about the upcoming match that is about to happen. The professional fighter was very serious. He said that he doesn't care deeply about other people's opinion. After a while, Chai Won-ji added that he will come out of this gym as a winner anyway. But the former outcast interrupted the cocky idiot. He said with a smile on his face that no one is asking Chai Won-ji because everyone knows who will win the upcoming match. The newcomer took the microphone in his hands and spoke loudly to the entire hall about how he had once already kicked a professional in one of their matches. All the journalists, reporters, presenters and ordinary fighters inside were shocked by the guy's statements, including Chai Won-ji. Chai Won-ji became furious. He started calling his opponent a bastard and talking about how the match was not on equal terms. And after that, the professional loudly shouted about how he would be better than Cha Mu Yul at any moment. Cha Mu Yul started to look disdainful and afterwards said that he was a dark horse in the previous match, but that didn't stop him from breaking Chai Won-ji's neck. The former outcast continued his speech. He said that he was the one who was getting all the attention because Chai Won-ji tried hard to make it happen. It was the hype that was raised because of the video of their sparring. The newcomer understood the fact that his opponent hated him with all his soul, but he was truly grateful to him because if it wasn't for Chai Won-ji, the former outcast wouldn't have ended up here and wouldn't have gotten this far into the realm of martial arts. Cha Mu Yul smiled wryly and said that he was about to have his first match on the professional stage, and in this competition, Chai Won-ji would give him the victory. The rookie added that he was very lucky to have an opponent. These words were the final point of Chai Won-ji's explosion of emotions. He stood up from the table and shouted loudly that Cha Mu Yul was a bastard. He wanted to punch the former outcast, but one of the people present in the room stopped him and told him to control himself. Hate and anger just boiled in the professional's body, clenched his teeth and frowned his eyebrows. He stood and silently looked in the direction of his opponent. Since it was a live broadcast, all the fans also saw what was going on in the room. They started chatting about Cha Mu Yul's choice of factual language and how they were getting freaked out by the national level fights. One of the custodians wrote that Chai Won-ji was a loser and a pussy. Many people were looking forward to this fight, as it promised to be very hot and unpredictable. All the fans and people just interested in the match came to the hall and took their seats. The reporters did not miss the match and sat down to watch. Han Ji-ju said that all the tickets were sold out from the pre-order and people were looking forward to tonight's show. And her partner said that the PPV sales were also much higher, which meant that the audience had very high expectations. The announcer took the microphone in his hands and loudly began announcing the start of the cruiserweight match everyone had been waiting for. The first professional match of 18-year-old talent opens Cha Mu Yul, whose height is 188 centimeters and weight about 85 kilograms. This fighter is also the winner of RFC. The former outcast came out wearing a black cape with gold inserts. There was no fear or apprehension on his face. Cha Mu Yul was very serious about this match. Behind him was his mentor named Im Soo, and on the left side was another fighter from their team. Before the fight, Im Soo asked the fighter how his breathing was. The fighter replied that it was normal. After that, the mentor also asked how the rookie was feeling and if he was sweating. Cha Mu Yul replied that he was feeling better. The mentor took Cha Mu Yul by the shoulder and questioned him regarding whether he was listening to him at all, and after that, told the former outcast to stop flying in the clouds and get serious about the upcoming match. The rookie said it was because he wasn't nervous at all. Im Soo was shocked by this answer and asked the fighter again. Cha Mu Yul turned around and questioned the mentor with a serious face as to why he was so worried if the match was going to be his. Such words sent Im Soo into a state of shock, and the phrase "breathe out and calm down" that Cha Mu Yul had just said to him completely knocked the mentor off his feet. Cha Mu Yul turned to his partner and said in a serious tone of voice that no matter what the situation was, he would still defeat Chai Won-ji. The former outcast smiled as he looked forward, for he realized that he had made full use of the protocol for the match, as well as his endurance, strength, and martial arts skills, all of which together gave him a 90% chance of winning the upcoming match today. The fighters stood against each other and stood silently in their seats. They were waiting for the announcer to announce the start of their fight. The newcomer was fully prepared for the start of the match. He had set a goal for himself which involved smearing Chai Won-ji with a thin layer on this octagon. Chai Won-ji stood and looked at his opponent with hatred. He was thinking that he would destroy the novice fighter into ashes and take all his fame into his pocket. The host started asking fans and fighters about if they were ready to see this match and erupt with heated emotions. The past soul of a true professional fighter recalled moments from his hospital bed when Chai Won-ji came to Cha Mu Yul and bullied and made fun of him in every possible way. What the current Cha Mu Yul has realized is that people who are destined to meet by fate are bound to see each other sooner or later. The referee waved his hand down, which meant that just now, the fight had begun and the fighters could start competing with each other. The former outcast didn't think twice and immediately began to run at his opponent, his eyes blazing with confidence that today's victory would be his. As soon as the fighters were given the sign to start the fight, Cha Mu Yul waved his hand towards his opponent to attack him first, but Chai Won-ji was able to dodge and bounce back a few steps in time. Chai Won-ji looked at his opponent with disdain. He wondered if this distance would be enough for him to make a chokehold. The professional only realized that if he was going to hit the former outcast in any way, he needed to stay much closer to the fighter. Unpredictably, Chai Won-ji was the first to attack, and at close range, he delivered a strong and sharp blow with his fist to the jaw of the former outcast. It was so strong that the fighter's head was thrown back. The host shouted loudly that Chai Won-ji threw the first punch, which was right on Cha Mu Yul's head. He added that today the professional shows a completely different side, because, in their previous fight, it was the opposite. After the deputy director threw the first punch, then he decided to immediately break the distance and bounce back a couple of meters. The professional looked at his opponent with anger. After a while he realized that in boxing Cha Mu Yul is no match for him, and after that, Chai Won-ji decided that he would use his advantage in coverage. The vice principal continued throwing his punches one after another. He was well aware that he had to block all of Cha Mu Yul's punches and keep his distance. Chai Won-ji knew all of his opponent's actions ahead of time, namely that he fights aggressively and if his hand strikes don't work, he will start dancing around the ring, and if that doesn't do anything for Cha Mu Yul, he will do kicks. After his reasoning, the professional struck the former outcast again. The announcer loudly shouted about Cha Mu Yul missing another punch again. Chai Won-ji's feints worked like a Swiss watch. Absolutely every single one of his punches was crisp and carried the deterioration of the rookie's reputation, which couldn't help but please the vice principal. Cha Mu Yul continued to stand in a fighting stance. He protected his body and head with his hands. The professional started talking about kicking him just once, because as soon as the former outcast tried to do so, Chai Won-ji would grab his leg sharply and hard, and after Chai Won-ji grabs his opponent's leg, then the fight is definitely in his hands and most likely the pro will be able to pull off a complicated takedown called mount, which carries an obvious knockout. The professional was already at full start as he was well aware of the fact that Cha Mu Yul would soon be attacking with his legs. Chai Won-ji had set a goal that involved simply grabbing the former outcast's leg. The deputy director was confident that if he did so, the victory would definitely be his. While Chai Won-ji was thinking about it, then, the rookie decided not to be petty and immediately kicked his opponent in the torso. It was so unpredictable that the deputy director's eyes widened several times and his mouth opened in sharp pain. Chai Won-ji's face twisted with intense pain. At this moment, the announcer shouted loudly that Cha Mu Yul had performed an amazing body kick, adding that the rising star had not shown them this shenanigans before. The presenter continued to praise the former outcast, saying that such a fast and strong punch that Cha Mu Yul threw could not be caught even if he wanted to. He also added that Chai Won-ji should try to break the distance in order not to be defeated in the first round. Chai Won-ji was completely bewildered. He covered his head and torso with his hands. The professional clearly remembered that the newcomer had done a very poor job with his legs in their previous competition. He also noticed that the strikes that Cha Mu Yul was throwing at the moment were very different from his past fighting tactics. The deputy director started dancing all over the ring. He tried to dodge Cha Mu Yul's attacks, but he didn't always succeed. The professional fighter realized that a simple tackle in this case would not work and he had to think of something else and more serious in order to win this match. But Chai Won-ji's thoughts and plan tactics were interrupted by that former outcast. He stretched out his leg and with a sharp movement, he launched an attack on his opponent's torso. It was another kick to the body. The professional fighter started to swear loudly and said that he should pull himself together as soon as possible. Chai Won-ji also noticed that his opponent's kicks were extremely fast and unpredictable, so he came to the conclusion that he should keep his distance between the newcomer. Chai Won-ji's teammates started shouting loudly for him to take care of his legs and at least last one round so as not to appear as a real weakling in front of the audience. The deputy director was furious at hearing the support of the guys, and all because he was well aware of the fact that to stand in this ring was not easy. Chai Won-ji decided to look at the timer and it showed that the end of the first round was 2.5 minutes. This news did not please the professional fighter. While Chai Won-ji was pondering over this whole situation and the words of his partners, he noticed the way the former outcast was preparing another strike. But this time, the deputy director saw and was absolutely ready for the approaching attack. Chai Won-ji looked at his opponent with disdain. His eyes were filled with hatred for the rising star and a desire to wipe him off the face of martial arts forever. The professional fighter leaned to the side and protected his body as he realized that Cha Mu Yul would hit him there. But then came a situation that was not expected. Cha Mu Yul made an attack called cough kick, which seriously shook the balance of the professional fighter. Up to this time, Chai Won-ji kept at a distance, but most likely, the former outcast will not tolerate it anymore and will attack his opponent. Chai Won-ji hoped that he would be able to protect his body from the newcomer's incoming blows. But alas, the vice principal was defeated too ridiculously, because both of the blows that Cha Mu Yul was throwing started out exactly the same and it was very difficult to distinguish between them. Im Jin-soo began to shout very loudly and support his partner in every way. He praised Cha Mu Yul for his sharp and unexpected blows, and also told him that he was not in vain pounding the pair in the gym. The unarmed could see how Jin-soo was worried and proud of the newcomer. Fans also did not stay silent. People who came to this match liked the social spectacle. They shouted loudly, raising their hands in the air. Chai Won-ji started to swear aggressively. He couldn't distinguish one punch from the other and it put him in a ridiculous position. The professional fighter set a goal for himself, which was to stay in this ring at all costs. He decided to look at the time, as he thought that there was not more than a minute left and soon this hell would be over. But when the professional fighter looked at the timer, he realized that he was fucked, because there was still more than 2.5 minutes left. Because Chai Won-ji was distracted and looked at the time, he was hit in the jaw by his opponent. His partner began to shout loudly at the professional fighter, calling him an idiot and telling him to watch the fight. He also added that once Cha Mu Yul was cornered, he could come out of there. Cha Mu Yul, without any distraction, struck his opponent again, but in his body. The announcer loudly announced that Chai Won-ji was missing blow after blow and at this rate, he was not far from losing. Ariel Watson was also watching the match. He smiled and said that Cha Mu Yul not only has the potential to be a star, but also that he is in perfect control of the entire match. The blogger added that his gut and eyes never deceive him. After a while, Ariel noticed that the former outcast was constantly changing his stance, as well as striking in the direction where the opponent was trying to move, and roughly speaking, Cha Mu Yul was gradually pushing the professional into a corner. In a nutshell, Cha Mu Yul's opponent is not only in an extremely difficult situation, but he also looks like an eerily pathetic fighter as he gobbles up one attack after another. Chai Won-ji feels like a real mouse that's been trapped and doused with poison. The vice principal was getting very tense with the situation where some newcomer was in the lead. Chai Won-ji swung his fist to strike and then shouted loudly that Cha Mu Yul was a total fucker. But Cha Mu Yul was not a bad guy either. He was able to dodge the blow with agility and without too much trouble. And after that, he performed a precise technique called tip kick. The announcer loudly announced that the rising star was confidently leading the match. Everyone in the audience was confident that Chai Won-ji will keep this fight under control all the time. But so far, he only misses punches and is unable to do anything. The host added that this is an unenviable situation and a professional fighter can only defend himself. Chai Won-ji tried to attack his opponent again, but no matter how much he tried, he deftly and confidently dodged each of his blows. The rising star once again pulled everything into his hands. He delivered a sharp and powerful punch to his opponent's jaw. It was so powerful that blood flew out of his mouth and his cheek flattened from the heavy fist. It was a fierce hail of blows. Cha Mu Yul had also developed in the boxing field. He delivered sharp and powerful blows to the body, as well as to the head of his opponent, not leaving him the opportunity to even rest for a few seconds. One of Chai Won-ji's teammates was furious. He started shouting loudly about not trying to box with Cha Mu Yul because once the former outcast started to control the distance, the professional fighter would be totally fucked. Chai Won-ji continued to box and said that he understands everything perfectly and he doesn't need to be taught anything. At this moment, Cha Mu Yul holds a technique that was called straight counter. The presenter said that it reminded him of art rather than ordinary boxing. The rising star held a so-called sliding punch. It was an extremely difficult technique to execute, which no one could expect at all in the debutante's performance. The professional fighter didn't give up hope and was confident that he could still get the win in this matchup. The deputy director completely changed the course of events. Instead of the usual kicks and punches, he decided to make a grab. This tactic very much surprised Cha Mu Yul because he did not expect this. Chai Won-ji embraced the torso of his opponent and then began to squeeze it. Chai Won-ji was happy with the news, but there was just a small problem. The professional fighter needed to switch places with Cha Mu Yul in order to take the fight. Deputy director's partner started to support him, saying that he is a handsome man, and then added that Chai Won-ji should not hesitate and start to break the newcomer, because if he does not get caught in the pain, he will win this fight and prove to everyone that Cha Mu Yul is not a star, but an ordinary brat. But the cheerful song didn't last long, because there was a second problem that concerned Cha Mu Yul. It was impossible to move him from his seat, and when the deputy director realized it, he was shocked, because he realized that he was in for a complete fuck-up. Cha Mu Yul looked at his opponent with disdain, and after that, he thought for a moment. He was well aware of the fact that Chai Won-ji had taken him to underhook, but he still couldn't do anything, which meant that the former outcast had a chance for a win. The rising star clenched his hands and with a sharp movement of his torso began to throw his opponent backwards. It was obvious from Chai Won-ji's face that he did not expect such a turn of events. The professional fighter could not believe that everything would end so easily and he would lose to this brat again. The host began to comment loudly on the actions of Cha Mu Yul. He said that the fighter held a very impressive technique called suplex, which simply smashed Chai Won-ji into the canvas, as well as the anthropometry of the newcomer simply does not leave the opponent and a chance to win. He added that the professional fighter fixed underhook, but the former outcast decided not to throw it. Blood kept pouring from Chai Won-ji's nose. The professional fighter couldn't believe that he would lose so easily to Cha Mu Yul in this match. At least he didn't want to believe it. As suddenly, the deputy director decided to hold a hold that was called armbar. The announcer shouted loudly that during a brief respite, Chai Won-ji had come up with the best solution for himself to win, and at the moment, he had secured the hold with his legs not very firmly, but at this rate, it would bear fruit. Chai Won-ji did not let go and continued to hold his grip, and soon called his opponent a bitch and added that now the high schooler was totally fucked and the first place in today's match would definitely be his. But the tackle that was called armbar was no hindrance at all for the rising star. He easily managed to turn the fight in his favor and get out of Chai Won-ji's trap, albeit not as easily as he would have liked. The professional fighter was very much shocked. He quibbled to himself about how this was even possible, especially for a high school student who has only been in the martial arts field for all of a couple months. All the fans were just as much sitting there with their mouths open and eyes widened. Even the very same Ariel Watson was shocked at what he had just seen. He didn't understand how a novice fighter managed to turn such a complicated scheme around. Cha Mu Yul didn't want to believe that this was the end and he had lost to some brat again. Cha Mu Yul threw him on the floor and continued to sit on top of him, all in order to definitely knock out his opponent. If the professional fighter suddenly had the strength to get out and take revenge. Cha Mu Yul was one of the best fighters in the RFC. In addition to resting on his laurels in his prime years and even having title matches, all martial arts fans and top-ranked people deserved to consider him an RFC veteran. And that was why Gi had no way of understanding why he was being typecast into canvas. And what's more, it was being done by some high school freshman. While the announcer was telling the audience about the whole situation, the novice fighter turned the attack around again. Cha Mu Yul was not at all shy to show his physical performance in all its glory. He held 2 slams in a row, although other fighters can hardly make one such technique. Cha Mu Yul decides to let go of his opponent's hand, and soon, this situation began to take a dangerous turn. After a couple of seconds, Cha Mu Yul strikes again, but from an overhead position. The host asked the audience if the fight would end on such a ridiculous moment, and then added that the sound of the former outcast's punch could be heard from the back of the room. Cha Mu Yul had tasted victory and so he was not going to stop at all. He struck blow after blow and did not spare his opponent at all. After another strike, the referee stopped the fight. He showed Cha Mu Yul a stop with his palm, which meant that he should stop and stay away from his opponent. The announcer shouted loudly that Cha Mu Yul won by knockout in the first round. He also added that it happened at 4 minutes 14 seconds with straight punches from Mount. Behind him was Cha Mu Yul, who was unconscious. The professional fighter could not even leave the octagon on his own. Everyone was shocked to see such a debut of 18-year-old guy, as they did not expect to see this at all. Cha Mu Yul's father was also watching this match. He was sitting together with his acquaintances. They were saying in a surprised voice to the man that his son had just beaten a real fighter. And another young man added that he got goosebumps. An acquaintance said that the man raised a good son. At this point, Cha Mu Yul started being interviewed and so all the guys stopped renegotiating this match. Cha Mu Yul had just defeated his opponent with stunning results. The host asked a question regarding how the rookie senior was feeling at the moment. The former outcast looked intently into the camera, and after that, in a serious voice said that it was difficult for him to say anything about it, as he had expected such an outcome from the very beginning, so he could not say anything interesting about it. After a few seconds, Cha Mu Yul decided to make a speech. He wanted to thank all the people who helped him with the preparation of this match. The fighter wanted to mention Jin Su, who taught him how to kick. He added that it was not easy at all, and without the knowledge that his mentor gave him, the fight would have been much harder for him. The high school student continued talking. He told everyone that he always wanted to help the weak people. Cha Mu Yul hoped that he would become a good example and all the outcasts would find help and support both in people close to him and in his surroundings. Cha Mu Yul did not forget to thank another important person in his life. He said that his father had always been his support. The former outcast knew very well that he could rely on his parent and he would not have any problems. The rising star began to talk about the fact that his father has always supported him. He also trusted Cha Mu Yul when he said that he wanted to go to martial arts, and without the help of such an important person for him, the guy would be unimaginably lonely. Familiar men began to tell him that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree and the kid grew up good. Continuing the interview, Cha Mu Yul said in a calm voice that he was ending his thank yous and wanted to make a serious statement. He turned to Han Dae-gun and then asked him if he wanted to fight again. The former outcast smilingly added that this time it will be serious and they will fight for the title. Han Dae-gun took the microphone in his hands and started talking. He decided to speak up for the fact that the match between Cha Mu Yul and Cha Mu Yul was pretty good, but he couldn't expect anything less. And after that, the professional fighter asked the high school student a question regarding why he thought they were birds of a feather. Dae-gun added that the rookie was asking too much of him. The professional fighter put his head down and apologized. He said that he is already scheduled for his 7th title defense and his opponent will be Cho Young-suk, who is ranked 2nd in the rankings, and in order to earn the right for the match, the fighter has won 5 fights in a row. The martial arts expert emphasized that Cha Mu Yul had just made his debut today and decided to fight the king just like that. And then Han Dae-gun asked the high school student if he had swung too high. The vice principal told the former outcast to take his turn and do his due diligence. Cha Mu Yul interrogated his opponent, and after that, he had a smile on his face, saying that it was just funny. Jang Yong-gil watched the high school rookie carefully as he didn't know at all what to expect from him. All over the stage Cha Mu Yul said about how people are interested and want to watch it. And after that he added that investors are willing to pay for everything and that should be enough. The former outcast added that that's what RFC is all about. The senior was confident that their viewers would be very interested in watching this. He added that it has been a long time since the real fighter match and so, they can have another round and see how it all ends. Han Dae-gun replied with a nonchalant face that he had already won more than once, and afterward added that they were only having an exhibition match. The rookie smiled and then said that he had won 5 fights before, and then asked Han Dae-gun if he was sure he had won that time, because Cha Mu Yul and the other fans thought that the pro had spent almost the entire fight on the floor. Cha Mu Yul asked a question to his opponent, which was about whether Han Dae-gun was satisfied with the victory he had just been awarded. From these words, the professional fighter went into a wild rage. He shouted loudly, calling the high school student a brat, and after that, the fighter clenched his teeth and was about to enter the ring with the former outcast. When suddenly, Jang Yong-gil appeared from behind. He stopped the fighter by pulling on his shoulder, and then took the microphone in his hands and said that on that note, the interview could end, because they have more main event. The president decided to change the subject. He said for all the spectators to support the upcoming match with warm applause. After a while, Jang Yong-gil and his secretary were in the office. They were discussing Cha Mu Yul's last fight with Chai Won-gi. The president called the high school student a smug jerk and added that they were about to fall for it and if all the guys danced to the former outcast's tune, nothing good would come of it.